Okay, brilliant. Thank you all. Welcome this morning to this event. My name is Peg Alexander, for those of you who I don't know. I know quite a few people here, but I don't know some people. I'm a presenter and journalist and general person about town. I do loads of events and things like this. So it's my job today to move us through the event. I will be doing that. I'll be telling you what's going on. I'll be helping us flow, hopefully, through this event. It's going to be an interesting event, and it's going to be a bit of a logistical event, I have to say, because we've got over 100 of us here in Leeds. And then on this camera over here, I don't know if you can all see, I'm walking over towards the camera here. We've got potentially up to another 100 people joining us on Zoom as well this morning. So one of the things we're going to do is try and make it interactive for those of you who are watching on Zoom. Thank you very much. And I know that people are watching from cities across the UK and wider. I know at least one person who's watching in Madrid this morning. Obviously, this is going to be an interactive event for those of you who are here as well. So, it's going to be a very inspiring event, I think, as well. Of course, what we're talking about here are the ideas that are coming through for the first steps in a plan for a zero carbon, socially just Leeds by the 2030s. We're going to be looking at donut economics. What is it? How does it work? What can we do with it? And what impact could that have on Leeds? Now, as you can tell, the first part of this event is standing. If anybody needs to sit, no, it's all right, sit down. If you've got a chair, Marvina, grab your chair, love, keep it. If you need to have a chair, please just, if you haven't got one, just wave your hand now. We'll make sure you've got chairs. So if you do need or want to sit down, please do that. But you'll see in a minute, the reason why you're all standing is because you're going to be making a donut, basically. And we're going to be doing that here. Because we have our friends joining us on Zoom, the only way people on Zoom can hear those of you who are here is when you speak into a microphone, I'm afraid to say. So we're going to have a bit of logistical challenges with that. Now, we've got a roving microphone. If anybody doesn't want to use the microphone or is worried about using the microphone for COVID reasons, then say what you want to say in the room, and then for Zoom, I'll repeat it so you'll hear it through this microphone. So be prepared, there might be a bit of repeating. If you are using the mic, they're pretty strong mics. So could I ask you to kind of, you can tell that, hold it a bit away from you, not right up like that, because obviously then just for COVID reasons, if somebody's using the mic straight after you, it means you basically haven't been licking the microphone, which kind of generally helps. We have got a hashtag for today. It's hashtag Leeds Doughnut. Please do use that. Please get social. But if we could also ask you not to spend the whole of the time in the main sessions on phones, because it's a bit distracting. So the organisers would like it if we can make sure everybody's as engaged as possible. Just to say, for those of you on Zoom as well, we want you to be part of the chat and the discussion. So unfortunately, you can't see Connor because he's sitting behind this camera, but oh, there we go. Well done. It's been turned to him. So Connor there, thank you, Connor, for waving. Connor he's monitoring the Zoom. He's going to be monitoring your chat, and he's also going to be monitoring any questions and thoughts that come through. So I'm going to keep coming to Connor. You're all going to get to know Connor really well, by the way. I'm going to keep coming to Connor throughout the session this morning to ask him for the thoughts, the comments, and the questions that are coming through on Zoom. So please do keep them coming. Before I hand over to Paul Chatterton, one of the organisers, and also to Councillor Neil Walshaw, who's going to introduce us, welcome us formally to this event, I just wanted to say on a personal level how excited I am that this event is happening, I have to say. I can't tell you how wonderful it feels to me that so many people are taking seriously the ideas in donut economics and the ideas about how those concepts could be applied to a city as big as Leeds. About 3 decades ago, I had a very different life. You can Google it if you want to find out what it was. And I used to talk regularly about concepts and theories and the ideas in donut economics. But, you know, it was a really tough gig. I'll be quite honest, it was very, very tough, because when I used to talk about these things, and those of us who were at that time, most people could not even get their heads around the kind of concepts that we're going to be talking about today. They couldn't imagine different ways other than the traditional ways that you learn about how you could run and organize economies. And I remember trying to talk about some of the issues that are in donut economics on things like the panel on question time, or on any questions, or direct interviews with journalists, or I will say even with family and friends. And when I broached the concepts, people just used to think I'd lost it, quite frankly. They really did. And as if I was almost living in some kind of unrealistic parallel universe. And then I look at you all today. Wow, look at this. It's brilliant. So I can't tell you how fab it is that we're now taking these ideas seriously, and we're really talking about them as something practical that could be implemented and is being implemented, as we know, in a number of world cities, major cities around the world, and how exciting that we're having that discussion about how we can do that in Leeds. So that's my bit over and done with. Can I move now to Paul Chatterton, one of the organisers and one of the authors of the report that you're all going to be getting today, just to give us a few words. Paul.
Thanks, Peg. Thanks, Peg. So welcome, everyone. I mean, I think words fail us in terms of how excited we are about engaging with you all today. So thanks for being here in person. Thanks for being here on Zoom. But welcome to our shared decade of transformation. Yeah. Over the last couple of years, international scientists have laid down a challenge for us that we need change that's rapid, far-reaching, transformatory, right? Yeah, large scale. So at Climate Action Leeds, we're grasping that challenge. So today we want to present and explore and share with you a shared challenge. Very simple. How do we create a Leeds that's safe and allows us all to thrive? Yeah, both at home and abroad. How can we meet our local aspirations within our global responsibilities? Very simply, how can we all live well at home and abroad within the natural limits of our natural world, both at home and abroad? It's a very simple challenge. So what we've done, we've spent the last year thinking, how can we start this journey in Climate Action Leeds? As Peg mentioned, this journey towards a very different Leeds in the 2030s that's socially just, that's nature friendly, that's zero carbon. And we thought, look, let's hang out with the Doughnut Economics Collective and see what we can come up with. So you've got in your hands today the Green Book. I want to see this at every meeting in Leeds over the next year, yeah? So this is our summary report, and we're going to present this later on. So that's our starting point. What sits behind that on the website, so climateactionleeds.org /Leeds Doughnut, is a longer report. It's a beast. It's 33,000 words. If you like that kind of thing, you can read it. That's the full data report that sits behind the small report, yeah? So you can have a look at both of those. So we're launching the Green Book today. I want to see that waved at every meeting in Leeds over the next year, because it's like, it wants to be our guiding compass for how we change Leeds over the next 10 years and how we partner with the City Council, with the private sector, with civic groups to create a shared journey to a safe and thriving city. So as I said, it's part of our joint work with Climate Action Leeds and their partners, funded by the National Lottery. It's part of our joint city planning process about how we can support change in this city. The report is an honest and challenging appraisal of where we're at as a city, but we need that as a starting point, yeah? But it's also full of exciting opportunities, and that's why we want to engage with you today, because it's only a starting point, yeah? It's only a beginning portrait of where Leeds is at. It's a snapshot. So the hard work starts from today, us all picking this up and creating a shared journey together. You're going to hear from a huge group of people today. Anybody with Climate Action Leeds t-shirts on has been doing an amazing job bringing this event together. You're going to hear, you've got your program, you can see who's coming together. I'm really excited about how this day unfolds. I'm going to pass over to Neil now to make some opening remarks from the council's point of view. So thanks very much for being here, everyone.
Paul. Just before we go to the next presentation, Penny on the chat's just asking, how do we access the report?
So can you put in the URL on the chat? Yeah.
Sorry, Tony's well ahead of me. He's just put it in.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah.
Thanks, Tony.
Excellent. Hope everyone can hear me all right. It's amazingly interesting and slightly scary to be in a room full of people again after 2 years of going to a screen. So it's a pleasure to be here. So, well, welcome and fraternal greetings from Leeds City Council and from the Labour administration. Fantastic. I couldn't really say things better than the summations that you've heard from Peg and from Paul so far. That's fantastic. So, anyone here go to university in the 1990s? Quite a few of us, right? Remember the 90s? The music was quite good. The fashions, I'm not going to talk about my flared jeans, but the way economics was taught at universities in the 1990s, when you look back, is an absolute disgrace. It was the 90s, remember, it was the end of history, and all you were taught was neoliberal economics. So I ingested loads of that at university. And then you enter the real world, and you realize that actually, that probably isn't really how the world works. And so it's frankly amazing and wonderful to be talking about donut economics and see that come into the centrality of how we make public policy, both in Leeds and across the country, and as so many cities are involved across the world. Its time has never been more than now. So don't worry, this is not a long talk or anything like that. It's just a few observations from the roles that I do and some of my experiences in how we address all the issues we face. So a wee bit of background is I'm Councillor Neil Walshaw. I'm Headingley and Hyde Park Ward. For anyone, Headingley and Hyde Park Ward? Woo! I'm not up for re-election, don't worry. More seriously, so I do 2 jobs on the council. I chair the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee and I chair the Development Plan Panel. The reason why I chair those 2 committees is you can imagine there's an awful lot of synergies between these 2 roles. So on the one hand, my day job is full of absolutely essentially terrifying climate data and then spending time with lots of urban planners. It's quite a duality there. So don't worry, there's not going to be loads of urban planning in this, don't worry, maybe a little bit. So this is where I become Councillor Doom and Gloom, so bear with. There'll be a lot of inspiring talk later today, and I'm very conscious that I'm in a room full of people who know a lot more about this than I do. And as a politician, you're always very much aware that you're a generalist, which is probably the polite way of saying jack of all trades and master of none, so just bear with me. So when as a city council, we look at the challenges we face, I was making a few notes last night and I was thinking, Leeds as a major European city faces the challenges the rest of the world faces. So we've got things like, in no particular order, we've got the climate emergency, we've got a housing crisis. The climate emergency also involves a biodiversity crisis. We've got a movement crisis in Leeds. How do we get around? I think a couple of people were talking in the game, that traffic's back. Yay, said no one. We have a problem. We have a problem with dignity of endeavor. That's what we need to provide for the people of this city. It's not just about jobs, it's about dignity of endeavor. So are the right jobs here? Have we got the right skills? Is our education system producing the right kind of values in our children? And they able to face the challenges of the 21st century? I've got 3 boys and my eldest is 15. And I look at him and I think that the century they're going to face is going to test that generation perhaps more than any other generation since the middle of the 20th century. And I'll come to that later on. Within that dignity endeavor, there's automation coming and technological change coming. And then we have the basics, water, energy, food. How are we going to provide those? Particularly energy and food are ever more relevant with the international situation we face. And then there's something that I think we like to call voice. Are people being heard? Am I listening to you? Are you listening to me? That voice, that democratic engagement, that the civics as our society are really under stress, and we need to find ways to communicate better. And all that's happening in a really fractured and increasingly fractured cultural landscape, which should concern us all. And across all of that, running in the background in a sort of a watermark font are resources, money. We need money to do a lot of these things. It's not all of the story, but it's a significant part of the story. Politicians often talk about austerity, but it's been very real for Leeds over the last 12 years, and that has to go into dramatic reverse. There is no substitute for having the resources to employ the people like you with all the ideas and to make those programs and practicalities real on the ground. But we do live in this incredibly changing world, don't we? Take, for example, I firmly believe that if, say, a Donald Trump or a Boris Johnson, good response, had faced the media and cultural landscape of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they would never have achieved high office. So we need to try to understand as a civil society why these things are happening. Where is this fragmentation happening? So in all that facing all those challenges, the way we talk really matters. Our language matters. Sometimes my kids call me Councillor Doom and Gloom because the job I do, as I've said at the start. But we've got to move beyond that. The environmental movement now encompasses everything we do in society. This is a movement to save our civilization. You know, climate emergency is, make no bones about it, a civilizational level threat. And that's not hyperbole, that's just the cold, honest truth. Now, we've got to be clear with people about that. We've got to find ways of doing things better. We can't just say to people, you can't have that, you're not doing that. We've got to find ways, better ways of saying yes, sustainable zero carbon ways that we can take across the world. And Leeds can be a real role in that. I'm inspired by the future of Leeds and what we can do. So there is almost a dizzying amount of potential of opportunity available for us, despite all the doom and gloom. And I really mean that when I say that. So let's talk about transition. Transition to, as Paul mentioned, the transition to a sustainable, socially just, zero carbon society is central to everything we do. And it should be central to public policy for the rest of the century. And one of the ways we need to communicate people about that is to say to them, this is an opportunity for you, your children, your grandchildren, their children. It's all about jobs, jobs, jobs. But suffused with throughout those jobs, 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 dignity of endeavor, which I think we probably all agree in this country. In terms of our general terms and conditions, we're not at that stage yet, are we? So as a council, we have a considerable amount of programs for getting to zero carbon, for a socially just transition. But it's processes like this, through Climate Action Leeds, through looking at Doughnut economics, that we can get better at that. Think of the synergies and connections and relationships we can build. Events like today and moving forward in time, we can make all the programs we do in the city better, sharper, better focused, more reach, more impact, 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 impact. And we can make sure that we make all those public pounds that we do have go as far as possible and bring in all the resources and talents of this city. It's, you know, it's an incredible series of opportunities. I have used the word opportunity a lot, I gather, but you know, it is important. So just to, I mean, I could talk a lot about Leeds City Council's programs, and yeah, just a couple of minutes. I'm not going to, don't worry. But just to say, one of our biggest challenges, and perhaps one to ponder for today, is the decarbonisation of residential properties. Just think about where you live. Pick an area in your community, right? And then think about the different people there, their income levels, the tenure types, the technologies in their homes, the type of homes. We have to decarbonise every single one, and we have to do it in a decade. Now, if that doesn't keep you awake at night, it keeps me awake at night, and nothing will. It's a huge challenge for us. It's perhaps the one that leaps out the most. So, focusing on Doughnut economics, it can only lead to better public policy outcomes, to my mind. And I think the reason why I mentioned residential property, it gives the scale of the challenge. And I think as a city, we have to be at the forefront of communicating to people what the climate emergency means and what challenges it confronts us with. And I am sort of a historian at times. Bore my kids rigid, I do. And cities and countries and collections of countries often talk about their foundational stories, their founding myths. And I don't mean in myth that something's not true, but it's what people rely on. Now, in this country, we may have noticed that perhaps our modern foundational myth is the middle of the 20th century. World War II, fighting fascism, people who look at it from all sorts of different lenses. But, however, it's 2022. Personally, I think that it's time that this country had a different foundational story. And I think it's on all of us to make a transition to a zero carbon economy, this nation's new foundational story, a story that we can all get behind and all work together on. After all, what is more noble than saving our civilization? So that's it from me. A few remarks. I'll pass Peg.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Neil Walshaw from Leeds City Council. So let me explain what's going to happen now. I'm genuinely not sure how this is going to work on the Zoom. Someone might be able to tell me. I think we might be moving the camera around a bit. Yep, thank you. So that on the Zoom, you can see what's going to happen here. Also, just to let you know, we are going to be putting the chairs out at the break at 11 o'clock. So when we get to past 11, it is going to be kind of going into more traditional theatre style where you sit down. So don't worry, you're not standing up all day. Right, the next bit we're going to do is we're going to be stepping into the donut, okay? We're all going to get donut-tastic for a minute, and we're going to create our donut here in the room. We have got Rob Shorter here who's going to help us do that. Rob? Ah, there you are. Hello. Do you want to wave to the Zoom, Rob? Yeah. Yeah, go and say
Hi. Hi, everyone on Zoom.
Great. Hi, Zoom. There we go. It's like a person, isn't it? Zoom is like a person. Rob is the Communities and Art Lead at the Doughnut Economics Action Lab, basically the hub for all this conversation about all things donut economics. Rob's most recent work has been exploring the role of imagination in having these types of conversation. What a brilliant thing. And to help people do that, he's designed something called the Imagination Sundial. If you go online, people will be able to get the sundial. Rob also has a history of working in cooperative development. And now you're going to help us understand this framework a bit more. You've got bits of rope. You've got all sorts of stuff. Let me give you them. Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Spoiler alert. I'm going to hand over to you now, Rob. Let me, shall I give you that microphone there? Is that okay? Oh, go with the main one. Yeah, okay, I'll give you that. We'll be doing this till 11 o'clock. We'll keep bringing in the people. Actually, no, if you could take that, because I'm going to keep bringing in the people on Zoom. That's okay. Over to you, Rob.
Thanks very much,
Help us
Peg.
understand this donut.
Great. What on earth has donuts got to do with economics is a common question. I hope you're all wondering that too. Maybe some of you already know, which is maybe why you're here. Maybe some of you don't. So what this session is to do is to introduce us to the core idea at the heart of donut economics, which is the donut. And we're going to be making that in the space that we have here, in this beautiful open space. So I work, as Peg said, at Doughnut Economics Action Lab. I'm here with my colleague Leonora, who will be speaking to us after the break. And what we try and do at Deal is introduce people to the ideas and give them the confidence to use them in their communities. I work with communities and Leonora works with cities, and so they can apply these ideas in practice, work out what they mean for imagining our economic future and then finding pathways towards that. But before I go any further, I realize we've not necessarily introduced each other to each other. So I'd just like to invite you in the next couple of minutes to turn to the person next to you, say hi, introduce yourself, and to say how familiar you are with the ideas of donut economics. Just a few sentences just to understand, where we're coming from, who's the expert, who could write donut economics too, and who's just coming to the idea for the first time and thought they were just coming to a bakery and about to get some nice snacks. So turn to each other now and then, yeah, introduce yourself. Hi, everyone on Zoom. If you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat and share a little bit about what I said, so what you know about the ideas and also potentially what you're interested to find out from today, that would be great. Just a couple of minutes to do that. Okay, we're going to get more of an opportunity to talk to each other throughout this exercise. So what I'd love to do now is invite those who are standing, maybe towards the back of the room, to come forward and actually create a circle around this space. So there's a lot of space over here, a lot of space here. So if people could come forward and maybe even just move around into the space that some of the people are vacating over here, so that we're all in this space together and we all have a sort of an equal view of the center of the room. If you just move around a little bit around here. Great. Thanks, everyone. So as I asked first off, what has donuts got to do with economics? It was actually, well, Kate Rayworth wrote the book Doughnut Economics, came up with the idea of the donut in 2011. And when she showed this visual, someone sitting around the table said, "That's a donut." And she thought, really? Are we going there? Are we doing that? It could have been a life ring, but they named it as a donut, and it kind of stuck. And there's something about hearing the word donut. You kind of lean in and you go, what's that about? Because we know that people are scared of economics. They're intimidating. It's intimidated. It's sort of it's a very academic subject you feel you have to study to understand. But no one's scared of donuts. So we like that the donut kind of gives a playful entry point to explore these ideas, because we believe at Doughnut Economics Action Lab that everyone has a right to explore these ideas and have a say in collectively, creating the future we want to live into. So what we try to do with Adil is come up with playful methods to explore the ideas as well. So creating workshops where there's no pen, paper, or PowerPoint. It's more about moving in around the space and talking to each other and using physical objects. And that's what we're going to do today with some rope. And as Peg alluded to, I've got two reels of rope. And so the first thing we're going to do is a team building exercise. We didn't realize we were here in a team together, but we're going to be working together to try and create the perfect rope circle. So underneath this table here, I'm going to take the first. And this is when people on Zoom are going to have just imagine what we're doing, or you can maybe see us a little bit. So if I just pull this, oh no, I pulled the wrong end of the rope. Okay. So if I start unraveling this, I'm going to hand this to, if you could just start handing that around the circle, hopefully what that's going to do is it's going to create a lovely ring. For those who can't see at the back, do come round, and then we could probably create a not quite a perfect single file circle, but, and I reckon you're standing already around the sort of circumference we're looking at for this rope, because I did a little test this morning. How are we getting on? So we've got an end here and we've got an end here. So they are ideally want to meet. So if you've got slack, maybe hold that stationary and then keep moving the slack around. And then fingers crossed, we're gonna, this is exciting. And they're gonna meet, way. Okay, so if we think that definitely deserves a single round of, a single person clap, that's what that deserves. So if you think that's a perfect circle, and I'm gonna leave it to the collective wisdom to think that's the case, then I invite you to now put that down on the floor. And for the, if anyone's really pernickety, then you can always just nudge it a little bit, here, there, that way. So and just as a safety warning, the floor is slippery. If you stand on the rope, it might move. So just be careful, know where it is, because we are going to be walking around in the space. So to start the idea of the donut, we have to go back to 2009, where Earth system scientists associated with the Stockholm Resilience Center in Sweden came up with 9 planetary boundaries that can quantify the impact of human activity. And these 9 planetary boundaries, they defined as a sort of a radiating out as kind of 9 segments on a circle. And for each of them, they defined what the safe space to be in, which was within the boundary, and then the unsafe space. And if we go over the boundary, then it's an unsafe space for life on Earth. And so these these 9 planetary boundaries became a framework that was able to kind of guide us as almost like a compass. And so just listing them, if we think about the upper atmosphere and the ozone layer, so putting ozone depleting the ozone layer up there. And then we're also putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and causing climate change. There's air pollution going into the air we breathe. There's chemical pollution, which is sort of things like plastics going into our surroundings and the oceans. We're putting nitrogen and phosphorus into the soil, which is leaching into the water, causing eutrophication. We have carbon dioxide that doesn't get dissolved into the oceans and causes ocean acidification. We have people converting forests and wetlands into cities and farmland. And we're creating this, what's referred to as land use change. And we are drawing water out of the aquifers and causing freshwater withdrawals. And this is all leading to ecological change and mass biodiversity loss. So sorry to bring the tone right down, but this was a pretty stark picture that they started to draw out. And of all of these 9 boundaries, if you can imagine them like a 9-handed clock, they said, you know, we're actually putting greater and greater pressure on the planet. And so we actually get to this point where we're overshooting on 5 of the boundaries. And actually one is recently quantified, and actually 6 of the 9 boundaries are now being overshot in terms of the safe space. And so theoretically, what they said we want to do is we want to get all the way back into the middle. We want to put no pressure on the planet. We want to recognize the damage we're doing and actually design systems that don't put so much pressure on the planet. But Kate said, well, if we go all the way back to the middle and we're not using any kind of resources, we're not sort of interacting with the cycles of the world in any way, that could well mean deprivation for billions of people. So whilst there's an ecological boundary, there also needs to be a social foundation, an inner boundary to define what it means to live a good life. And so for that, we need a second rope. So this will be a piece of cake because you did the first one so well, but we're going to need maybe a smaller circle of people. So again, maybe every other person step forward and we're going to do a very similar thing. If, there we go. Good. Thank you so much. And we're going to pass this around, and it's going to probably create maybe 1.5 meters inside from the outer one. I think that's probably best. Seamless. Thanks so much. Great. Could probably take half a step further backwards to get rid of the slack. Excellent. And then when you're happy, I think I'm happy, it can go on the floor. And sort of making sure we've got a nice even space for the in between. Great. So this is the social foundation. We had an ecological ceiling defining the boundary for safe space. Now we have a social foundation which defines the just space for humanity. So this is crowdsourced from the UN Sustainable Development Goals, where it calls out things like the need for clean water and food and health and education and housing and transport and political voice, equality and diversity, social equity, and other things. So what we have here is a hole in the middle of the donut where we don't want anyone falling short on the essentials of life. And we don't want to be overshooting the ecological ceiling, which is the unsafe place of humanity. So what we get is this space that looks rather like a donut, which is what we refer to as the safe and just space for humanity, where we don't want to leave anyone falling short on the essential of life, and we don't want to overshoot planetary boundaries. So the safe and just space for humanity. So what we're going to do now is we're going to explore this space together. And to do that, and also to continue to meet each other and connect with the things that we care about, I'm just going to think about how we're going to do this, because we're probably about 80, 90 people in the room. What I invite you to do is to kind of feel what this space would be like. What does it feel like to walk around the room, and just when you're in the space of social shortfall where people aren't meeting their needs, just be here and think about, what those things are, what that might mean for you. If you're out here in the space of ecological overshoot, what does that feel like to be out and standing in this space? And what does it feel like to be in a space where everyone is thriving in balance with the planet, and to walk around this space too? So what I invite you to do in silence, actually, as you reflect on those things, is just to very slowly walk, just mindfully walk around the space, and to do that. And then as we go, I'll introduce what we'll do next. So if you begin to step into the donut, I invite you now just to mingle in amongst each other. So as you move around, notice the people you're walking by. Notice the beautiful space we're in. How much light is coming in, how great that is. And I invite you now to slowly come to a standstill opposite someone else. And with that person, I invite you to think about the outer boundary of the donut, the space of ecological overshoot. And I invite you to share with the other person a natural place that you love and that you hope to never lose. So somewhere that means a lot to you. So, and share with the other person a natural place that you love and hope to never lose. So if you have a couple of minutes each to share, I invite you to share that and have the other person just listen and receive that. Don't have to respond, just listen to what you want to share and then swap over. And after 2 minutes, I'll just make a bell sound and then you can switch over. A welcome back, I think, to all the people from Zoom. Thank you for doing this online whilst we've been wandering around this space. Thank you all. So the donut is a model. And as statistician George Box says, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And the donut is useful, we think, because it invites us to think holistically. It invites us to think about social and ecological together. And it brings together so many dimensions of that together. We can draw connections. So whilst it invites us to think holistically, it invites us to also think in interconnections. And if we are working on any of the dimensions of the donut, which we'll get into this afternoon, then because they're all connected, it means we're connected working with them together. And that's what we're doing here today, is we are drawing connections amongst all the people working towards this goal. But it's also intended as an invitation to bring your ideas and your creativity and your gifts to the work. And so we want to hear the voices of all. So just, I'd love to hear a few voices, maybe hear from a few people. Would anyone like to share something they heard from someone else, something that maybe that resonated and connected with something that they shared as well? Would anyone? I'd love just to hear a couple of things from people. So would anyone? Yes, Sal.
I can manage actually without a mic, if you like. But, on Zoom, okay, great. Hi. I just wanted to say I spoke to somebody. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. I'm just trying to think now. It's gone quite out of my head. Yeah, I was speaking to somebody who was talking about the value of meeting people where they are, and from that creating a connection from which you can move forward. And I thought that was just such a wonderful, wonderful idea, because it's so easy to think, oh, well, we know what the answer is, and really everybody else should know. Well, they don't. So let's go out, meet them as friends, and encourage them to do this.
Thank you, Sally. Yes.
I think I was drawn to most of the young people in the space because they were just amazing. What came across was almost just being in that space of knowing that you're about to lose potentially that future, that first question. And then the second question of just knowing the system is already flawed, get against you if you're in this space and you're not able to move to actually fix your problem because you're already in this dark lack hole. And I think something that made everything just add in my mind was just thinking about David Oluwale and trying to have a conversation with David Oluwale about donut economics. Absolutely, it's not going to digest. So acknowledging the privilege that we're in this space, that we can have this conversation, and how do we take this conversation and make it palatable to others? So that's what I got from it.
Thank you. We're going to hear a couple of comments from Zoom, if that's all right. So I'm just going to go over to Connor and ask what sort of, were there any reflections that were coming through?
Michael from Together for Peace simply says, we all like woodland. Kate Locke also says, we all love trees and nature. And we've got a comment from Paul Magnell. Apologies if I'm not pronouncing that right, but he says, in an age of crises and urgency, perhaps we need to do a bit more slow and listen to each other and to nature. Yep, those are the comments.
Thank you very much. So there's a quote actually that reminds me of a sort of an artist facilitator who inspired me in the work I did in Imagination, who said, if we want to speed up change, we paradoxically need to slow down. And so today is actually an invitation as well to slow down, connect with each other. We have this lovely, the gift of the time we have until 5 o'clock today to do that. I think that's all I want to share with you when introducing this core idea of the donut. We're going to hear after the break about how communities are using this, how cities are using this idea. But now we have a break and also an opportunity to sit down for the first time in the day. Well, for those of you in the room. So I'm going to hand back to Peg.
Can we give Rob, please, a massive round of applause for that? That was fabulous. Thank you so much, Rob. Do you know, he said the magic words at the start of that event, didn't he? He said, no PowerPoint, which are absolutely the magic words. Thank you so much for that. I thought video. What was fascinating from the video was which of you decided to go clockwise and which of you decided to walk anti-clockwise. And I was trying to work out, is there some meaning in that about those of us who may be rebels and those of us who maybe aren't so much. Anyway, you can ponder that over your coffees. Teas and coffees, of course, up at the back. We've only got 15 minutes. We've got quite a lot of us. As Rob was saying, coming back, we're going to start looking at that question of how others are using the donut. At city level, we're going to get some real examples as well. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. So go get your breaks. Thank you everyone for engaging so far. Zoom, we will be back in 15 minutes and we'll start looking at how this is actually being implemented elsewhere. Moving on. There's so much that people want to talk about, but save them for lunchtime now, if that's okay. The energy in the room, though, is lovely. It's so heartening to see and hear. So welcome back to this next section of the event and welcome back to everyone on Zoom. We've had good numbers of people watching us on Zoom as well, which is really great. We will be still involving you in this part of the event. So keep your questions, thoughts and comments going on in the Zoom chat and Connor will bring them to us when we get to the question and answer session. This bit now until lunchtime, we're going to be looking at how others are doing the donut. And then at 12 o'clock, we're actually going to get an outline of the report that's been produced, the portrait picture for Leeds. But we're going to start getting quite practical now. We've got two fabulous speakers here who we know are going to inspire you big time to start thinking about how you can use this donut practically, what you can do with it. And I know our first speaker is going to inspire us about all the other cities and other places that are using the donut. So let me introduce to you Leonora Grcheva. I've been practicing, thank you. Leonora Grcheva. Leonora is the Cities and Regions lead at the Doughnut Economics Action Lab. And she works on the relevance of the donut at city strategic level and the Deals Cities project. She also works with different cities and place-based administrations to help put this concept into the context of different areas of their own places. She's an urban planner, researcher, and participation practitioner with over a decade of experience facilitating engagement, including as an urban consultant for UN Habitat. You're going to talk to us about the donut and the city. Keep your tweets going. Remember, hashtag Leeds Doughnut. Not so many tweets at the moment. Please do keep those going. There we go. We're just getting a mic straight over to Leonora. So Leonora, please talk to us about the donut and the city.
Thank you, Peg, and what a joy to be here and to have a matching microphone. Amazing. This is all part of the plan. We're gonna dive back right into it. We spent the morning with Rob exploring what we call the global donut, the vision of the donut. And this is what that looks like when put into a visual. So we have, if you would just hold it, Rob, the inner rope, without moving, Rob. The inner rope is that social foundation where all meeting the needs of all people, and the outer rope was the ecological ceiling. So within the means of the living planet. And this is the whole of critical human deprivation, and this is the critical planetary degradation. And this is how that donut looks like when we put into it all of these themes that matter. So we have the 9 planetary boundaries on the outside of the ecological ceiling, and all these themes that are what matters to have what every human needs, to meet the needs of all humans. So we have water, food, energy, networks, housing, equity, political voice, etc. And finally, this is how the mirror of humanity looks like today. So when we are quantify those planetary boundaries, and when we quantify those themes, those social themes of in the inside of the donut, this is how much people are now falling short of their life's essentials and how much we're overshooting the ecological limits. And this isn't even sadly updated with the latest research where 2 other boundaries have been pushed. So moving on from this grim image towards the questions, how do we reverse this image? How do we turn these red lines, these red wedges back into that safe and just space of the donut? We are going to start to start doing that, Rob has carefully constructed a prop. Version 150 done over 2 years of exercises. So here we have our ecological ceiling and the social foundation. And now we want to land us back to the scale of cities and of places and ask the question, how can our place, how can Leeds live within the donut? And how can our place, how can Leeds contribute towards humanity moving towards living in the donut? And to do that, we have a concept that we want to introduce that's called unrolling the donut. So what that is really zooming into this safe and just space, the green space of the donut, and asking, what does that mean for our place? And how do we start moving towards that? How do we build that vision? So we're going to move on to really demonstrating that concept. And to answer that question, we're going to literally unroll the donut.
This is the first time I've tried this, with an audience.
Yeah. And there will be short music while Rob is doing this. As you can see, getting inside the donut takes care, takes time, takes labor. But you can be playful and have fun with it as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Now we unscroll.
Okay. Hold it there.
That's what I wanted to hear.
And voila, we come to the donut unrolled. So we have our ecological ceiling and we have our social foundation, but this is where we're zooming into our places. And when we're zooming into our places, we need to recognize that we need to be thinking at the same time of both our local aspirations of our own place, but also our global responsibilities, the connection of our place with the rest of the world, and the responsibilities that we have to the rest of the world, the communities and the planet. And that brings us to what we call the 4 lenses of the unrolled donut. So those 2 dimensions, the ecological ceiling and the social foundation, become these 4 lenses. And to move towards that vision as a place, we ask these 4 questions. How can all the people of this place thrive? And this is that local social scale, that local social lens of the donut. Then we ask, how can this place be as generous as the wildland next door? And that's about our local ecology and how we are taking care of it, the local ecological scale. And then we zoom out towards our global responsibilities and we ask, how can this place respect the health of the whole planet? And finally, there's the global ecological lens. And the 4th lens is the global social lens, asking us to ask, how can this place respect the well-being of all people? So it is these 4 questions that become the guide for our places and for that vision for humanity and for our cities for the 21st century of living within the donut. And now, in a very anticlimactic manner, I'm going to switch to PowerPoint. Sorry, go for it. So it's basic, these 4 questions are bringing us to this one big question that we're asking, that's the starting point of cities and of places, asking the question, how can we be living in the donut? And that one big question, bringing these 4 together, is how can our place become a home to thriving people in a thriving place while respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? And just gonna briefly zoom into all these 4 questions and what each of them mean for our place. When we ask, how can all the people of our place thrive? This is about the well-being and the people in our own place. This is about all these themes of the social foundation: food, water, health, education, culture, income, and how are we enabling people to have access to those in our own place? And what does the definition of thriving mean in our place? Because it's different for every neighborhood, for every city, for every village. And the second question is the local ecological question. How can our place be as generous as the wildland next door? And this is about recognizing that every place, every city was built in a natural environment, in a habitat, and it invites us to go to the closest nature next to us, whether it's a forest, whether it's a wetland, whether it's a savanna, and learn from the generosity of nature that keeps itself in balance, that doesn't produce any waste, and asks us to go beyond the notion of sustainability and go towards being actively regenerating and restoring our local ecology. Drawing from a science called biomimicry, we need to learn all these things from nature that cleanses the air, houses biodiversity, stores high carbon, cycling water. How can we be imitating nature in how we plan and how we design our spaces, whether it's through leaving soil porous and allow the soil to build and regenerate itself, and for water to stream through when the rain falls, whether it's through designing wildlife corridors and meadow spaces to welcome wildlife in our cities. How can we be as generous as the wildland next door? And then we zoom out to that scale of the planet, really. And we ask, how can our place respect the health of the whole planet? And that is about recognizing the impact that our place has on those 9 planetary boundaries and asking, how can we be reducing our contribution to crossing those boundaries? How can we be, whether it's through decarbonizing transport, whether it's through recycling and reducing the waste we produce, whether it's to creating circular economies and reducing the need to be extracting more and more resources? How can our place respect the health of the whole planet? And finally, the 4th question is, how can our place respect the well-being of all people? And that's recognizing that in the globalized world that we will live in today, we're all interconnected with the rest of the world, whether it's through global supply chains, whether it's through refugee pathways. Our place, Leeds, has impact on communities worldwide. Where was this microphone produced? Where was this where was this wood sourced? What were the conditions in which the workers were mining those resources or working in warehouse, in transport facilities? What are all the communities that were impacted as these products were being brought and used in this city, as this building was being built? So those are the 4 questions that build this holistic vision of the donut in our own place. And they kind of become the framework guide for cities, for communities, for places that are putting donut economics into practice, really. And it can become a framework that one can put, and we're seeing that in practice, anything in the middle of it, whether it's developing a holistic data sets in these 4 lenses, as we'll see Leeds present, whether it's a vision for a city, whether it's a policy, a strategy, an action plan, a neighborhood design, we can put anything and ask the question, how is this impacting the communities here and around the world, the ecology here and the planet, and enrich and improve and reflect on everything that we're doing. So to move us along, we're kind of seeing communities, change makers around the world really getting started or getting way ahead with the concepts of donut economics in a lot of ways, putting them into practice, exploring them, convening conversation and taking action locally. And we're also kind of, they're all brought together on our Deal community platform, where we have so many members around the world sharing back their stories of action and inspiring others to take action. And at the same time, and the part that I'm going to focus on is we have cities, local governments, regional governments, national governments, even around the world, picking up these concepts and turning them into practice in their own administrations. And starting with Amsterdam, there are now over 40 places around the world, and the number keeps on rising, that are picking these concepts up. And these concepts and the tools that we're making are adaptable to every context. We don't make how-to guides. We leave cities to guide their own change and adapt them to their own context, because every city may have a similar vision to be moving towards that safe and just space of the donut, but all cities will have a very different starting point, a very different journey to get there. It's going to depend on a lot of contextualized circumstances, whether it's legal and national legislation, whether it's budget cycles, whether it's election cycles, whether it's the local communities that are driving the change. So each cities are finding their ways of moving towards the donut. But we're also seeing at the same time emerging patterns on the type of actions that city administrations are taking, and how exciting to be hearing today from a Leeds councillor as well, and exciting to see what comes next for Leeds. These are some of the different ways in which cities are picking up the concepts and going forward with them. Some of them are using donut economics as a compass. Some of them are starting by developing this set of metrics that we'll learn more about, data, kind of holistic data. Some are redesigning decision-making processes. Some are bringing the concepts into existing plans, strategies, policies, and projects, whether it's a design of a building or a climate strategy or a mobility strategy. Some are reflecting on the very design and organization of cities and the need for new roles or new ways of working. And some are using them as driving processes of building a shared vision together, enabling city actors and change makers to come together like you are here today, or even questioning and redesigning particular parts that have a high level of impact, like procurement and supply chains. So I'm gonna glimpse through a few examples of city in the interest of time. This is just kind of an overview of the many cities that are actually building these holistic data sets, the city portraits, from Amsterdam to Barcelona to Glasgow, to El Monte in Chile, to Yerevan in Armenia. And each of these holistic data sets looks very different. We're following the same indicators, but the data that matters in every place is different. The impact that every place has different. In Brussels, in Belgium, they've developed this data set, but at the same time, they've taken this 4-level approach that you see on the top right, of looking at the macro level of the region. So this big data, holistic data that is guiding the vision, but then they're looking at the meso level, meaning reviewing individual policies and strategies and how they're helping move towards that vision. Then they're looking at the micro level to individual actions and projects by different change makers, organizations, community groups in the city, and how to support them move towards the vision. And finally, they're looking at the nanoscale, which is the scale of an object, of a microphone, and looking how individual objects and us using them has impact across those 4 lenses. In Mexico, they've used kind of the framework of the donut to start their participation process with a wider community as they're developing their 2040 municipal development plan as a way to bring together the complexity of many projects and many actions needed to move from the today's donut of Mexico, where they have all these red wedges and all these people falling short and the ecological ceiling broad, towards the potential 2040 donut of Mexico, which is what could happen if certain actions are taken, if certain strategies are developed, as opposed to the leave things as are donut. So it's a way to guide that conversation to come together around a collective vision. In Nanaimo in Canada, they also developed their own donut, their own data set, and they've been using it as a unifying framework for the work of the city administration. The council adopted the donut as a guiding framework to guide all strategic decisions and policy making. And they've been using this unifying framework to bring coherence between different types of strategies and policies that have often been not only not talking to each other, but often even contradicting each other, and guide them to all work together systemically towards the same vision. Skip this. And in Cornwall, England, they have been designing their own decision-making wheel. So really a unique decision-making process using the social and ecological indicators of the donut that is meant to really bring the value of these indicators in the processes of decision-making, so that they're not guided by cost and benefits and limited indicators, but that every project, every policy, every new strategy has to answer this question and reflect on how that policy will impact each of these indicators in the long term. What will be the positive or negative impact it may have, and then to make amendments accordingly. And they've also integrated this into their vision, long-term vision for 2040, in which they basically have this data set that will enable them to see where they are now as a city, how they're doing on all these indicators, and how they're progressing. So that you can see in this donut on the right, they've just done their first year, second year monitoring process, and very visually demonstrated where they've improved, where it's green, where they've stalled, where the wedges are yellow, and where they've actually gone worse, something we often don't see in cities where we build long-term visions. And I'm very conscious of time, so I'm gonna wrap up by saying, well, just gonna skip through also in Bhutan, where they have very similar concepts already at the national level, but they've been using this as a donut economics as a reflective tool in workshops, in building their strategy for the capital region, finding ways to bring the different priorities to talk to each other, but also to be reflective on the longer term future of the city and of the country. And kind of to wrap up, we at the Doughnut Economics Action Lab have been really learning from the practice, from the evolving practice of cities everywhere that doesn't exist, that we're all creating together as we go along. And what we've been learning from them is, you know, why cities end up engaging and continuing engaging with the donut. And this is some of what cities have told us, is that because it resonates with people and communities, whether young or old, coming from different sectors and different walks of life. It's easy to communicate, it's easy to have conversations around, it's easy to build visions together. It brings together the often disconnected social and ecological work, the different departments and silos of administrations, actors in city and outside, and strategies and policies. It offers a holistic approach for complex challenges like climate change that need a systemic kind of thinking. It offers a new way to measure progress and to track the progress of cities through its metrics. And it gives structure to complexity and a hopeful outlook for the future, really, that it's possible, that change is possible, and that we can impact it. And finally, it's flexible, it's adaptable, it's different for everybody, and everybody can start doing something based on their own possibilities. So I'll stop here and invite everybody also to join us and to learn more about the different work that cities and places are doing on our platform.
Thank you so much, Leonora. That was fabulous. I know Great, thank you. We could have had a lot longer. Thank you for dashing through that so quickly. What we're going to do quickly is take some questions. I'm going to take 3 questions here, and then I'm going to come to Zoom and get 3 questions on Zoom. I'll come back to you to answer the 3 questions at 3 at a time, if that's all right. If I could ask you to just hold your microphone closer to your mouth, if that's all right. Thank you, just to make sure that everyone here and everyone in Zoom is getting everything. Brilliant. So let's just have 3 questions. We're gonna, I'm probably gonna get you to shout out and then I'll repeat them for people on Zoom. So let me see who would, and obviously keep the questions short if that's all right. Who would like to ask a question here in the room? Let's see your hands up generally if you want to ask a question, and then I'll know who to come to. Okay, okay, we've got 1, 2, 3. Okay, so if you want to go with your question.
Is there a political commonality between all the cities? Are they all type political?
Thank you, brilliant. And if we could go for this question here. Okay, brilliant. Just so I repeat those for Zoom. The first question is there a political commonality between the cities that are going for this? The second question is really interesting because I was thinking now exactly about Nanaimo. How is this working in terms of Indigenous communities and the population of Nanaimo? And we had another question over here.
Yeah, I would like to ask, what is the link between national government and city municipalities? Because in my experience, the councillors spoke about resources which are needed. In some countries, municipalities have quite a lot of resources and decision-making power. In my opinion, in the UK, they have very limited resources and decision-making power. Like, how do you manage the transition? So if the central government is not in favor or not interested in such a transition?
Right. Thank you, Ranhard. Great question. That's about the relationship between national government and local authorities. What happens if local areas don't have much power and they don't have money from national government? So if I can hand those 3 questions back over to you, Leonora. Thank you.
I'll try to whiz through them. On the political commonality, I would say that there is certainly a tendency that the cities are more progressive, more left-leaning. They're often cities that have already or started to kind of do pledges for taking climate action, but also not always. There are also places that aren't necessarily, progressive by political definition. And actually the one thing about the donut that we've noticed, and we've gotten direct kind of requests and conversations from politicians, from city leaders coming from all spectrums, because it is a very uniting concept, because it goes beyond kind of the typical topics that tend to be polarizing, and it's very uniting in a way. So there is a tendency, but it's not exclusive. On the second question on Nanaimo, one thing that I would generally say is that our approach is that local places need to drive their local change. So I wouldn't dare, other than showcasing the general approach cities are taking, to take questions in their name and the action that they're taking. It is obviously, if one is looking at the donut and at all those 4 questions, including all voices, including marginalized voices, including Indigenous peoples, including all genders, sexualities, everybody that tends to be, typically less heard, is part of the core of the concepts. So I would say that every city that takes on the challenge to take the donut seriously is taking that part as well seriously. And one thing I know is that there was a long participatory process around building that vision and that Nanaimo donut, but I wouldn't dive deeper or know how to, or dare how to. And finally, the third question is less specific to the UK than you would think. And I've had this conversation with many cities, and all of them will be like, but us, we don't have the resources. It's a global challenge, unfortunately, the lack of resources, the lack of capacities, the legal disagreements, the pet dependencies, etc. But we have another kind of framework at Donut Economics that we call Powers to Act that we're developing, and I didn't share this today. And it's very much about recognizing what your city can and what your city cannot do, because every city has jurisdictions of many things. Every city can do something, no matter how big the limits. So it's about the approach that we're taking is recognize those, map those, start with those, then recognize where you need to be collaborating with other levels, recognize where you are maybe need to be joining forces with other stakeholders, and take action where you're able to take action. So this is why I'm saying that we'll see that many cities are starting different ways, even within the city themselves. Some are starting at a mayoral level because a mayor was actually driving this vision. Some will solve with a climate department. Some will start with a very small mobility department because that's where the energy is, but they have powers to act there. They have powers to do change there. And what we see is that when inspiring transformative change starts happening at whichever level, it trickles, it's inspired, makes ripples.
So we've got a situation where trickle down is working then on donut economics. Yep.
Oh, I'm gonna use that phrase.
Let's
just gonna withdraw from this.
Let's go to Zoom after that controversial thing that I just said there. Let's go to Zoom. Connor, have we got some questions, some thoughts on Zoom here?
Yeah, we've got quite a few questions. I'll try and pick out the 3 questions that I don't feel that's been covered yet. So there's one from Ben Tung from NHS in England. He says, does reducing down the donut to a series of metrics risk dangerously undermining the holistic complexity of the donut vision? Although he says that he can't think of a different practical first step in terms of implementation. Yep. No worries. Yeah, I'll read this one. So Liz has asked, which city council is the best example of use of the model for the council decision making, in your opinion? And the other one here is, are there examples of applying donut economics to households or very small communities? And that's from Paul Magnell.
Okay, so on the first question of whether just narrowing it down to metrics has a risk of losing the meaning of the holistic picture, yes, it does. If you just stick to metrics and if you just do those metrics in a very academic, desktop-based way and don't take it any further, it absolutely does. It's about changing our understanding of what metrics are and how participatory they're built into and how flexible they are to be responding to the changes in the community. So it's how you build those metrics, but it's also then how those metrics are taken forward. What do you do with them? How do they guide the change? How do they guide the community action? How do they guide your services as a city or your policies or your health strategy? So if you just stay at that very narrow set of metrics, it will absolutely be losing that long-term effect. But luckily, we don't see that happening that much. The second question.
An example of an area where they've used this to change the way the council makes decision making.
Well, I will say this: the practice of donut economics being implemented by cities is less than 2 years old. I mean, we are kind of in a historic moment here where you'll hopefully 10 years from now, you'll look back and be like, I was in that room where they didn't even know what's happening yet, but it was happening. But the practice of cities is less than 1-2 years old. It's very early on to be talking about this is who did best, and this is where we can see the most positive outcomes because of the way we're doing it. We're seeing the early change, and we're seeing how it impacts the internal works of the council, how it's starting to impact the council's relationship with their communities, how it's starting to guide the policies in the right ways and the strategies to be more inclusive, to be more holistic. But it's early to be talking about outcomes on the ground. And that is one of the ideas of that set of metrics, is for us to keep an eye on it, to actually see how we're doing a year, 2 years, 3 years from now. So I think we're yet to be seeing the answers to that question. And I'm hoping the early things are very positive from what we're seeing.
And the last question very, very quickly was about the household. Have you got examples?
Yes, Kaur that's going to be presenting after me is going to be the most amazing
Well,
example.
let's move on then, I think. Perfect way to move on. Brilliant. Can we just give a massive round of applause to Leonora Grcheva? Thank you, Leonora. That was brilliant. That's a cracking handover. Thank you so much. So much. Let me introduce our next speaker to you. Dr. Kaur is the co-founder and director of Civic Square in Birmingham. Imi's a social and civil activist from Solihull. She was director of Impact Hub Birmingham and is currently the co-founder, as I was saying, and director of Civic Square. Now, Civic Square, which I'm sure you're going to explain to us more, but it's a bold new approach to visioning, building and investing in civic infrastructure for neighbourhoods of the future. It includes a public square, a neighbourhood economics lab, and a creative and participatory ecosystem. Imi's come up from Birmingham this morning. Thank you so much. We'll move about extra 10 minutes into our next section, so don't worry about that, because don't worry. No, don't worry, we'll do that. I'm just going to take the time off Paul, basically, for the next section. Imi's going to talk to us now about the donut and neighbourhoods. So if I could hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leonora. Thank you, everyone. Yay! Oh, you know what? Legit, I absolutely love Leeds. You guys are all so friendly every time we come up here. So the first ever time I came up here was with the play blocks with Emma Bierman. So big up Emma Bierman, because she's been doing incredible work. I don't think she's here. But thank you for the warm welcome. So I'm really excited to talk about what we've been doing in Birmingham. And to be fair, like, there's absolutely no way all the things that we have talked about. Oh, hold on. How do I make this? I'll have to just go through it individually like this. Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. Yeah, so there's no way I'm going to be able to talk about all the things to do with Civic Square, the donut in Birmingham, and all of these things. So I was trying to think about what's the most important thing I would love to say right now. And this was 3.5 years ago, just after I think Kate had done the TED talk. One of our team reached out to her and said, look, we're a team that are super interested in you coming to Birmingham and just telling us more about it. And we were in a room like this. There was about actually this many people, lots of members from the Impact Hub, of those of you who remember the Impact Hub Birmingham, and lots of councillors and people and people who community activists and people who were super interested. The room was absolutely alive after hearing the talk. But then the questions came. And the questions came, and I was like, I built the hub because I wanted to the imagination of the population of my city to flourish and thrive and not be stuck in, we just had the Cllr report, not be stuck in this like limited version of what is tangible and possible and who a few people think are going to be able to do it. And I was like, oh my God, okay, this is going to be horrific. Because of course, what we quickly moved to was like, that's not actually possible. There's no money, austerity. People love talking about communities and marginalized voices. They love it, don't they? They love telling you what you should do. And then you're like, and I was standing there thinking, yeah, and that's going to take big, deep, long work. And the climate crisis took hundreds of years to get to this point, and so did colonization. We're definitely not going to do it in a 4-year political cycle. So, wow, I need to get out of this space, right? I was like, yo, this is not going to be cool. And Kate just said, just do whatever you want, Imi. See what resonates, do what you like. But we fell in love with this idea of 2 concentric circles that played the interdependence of, oh my God, the interdependencies of social foundations and the global ecological ceiling and planetary boundaries together, planetary health and people health together in a simple way. And recently at a project launch that we did, which I'll talk about in a second, Kate said that, you know, the complexity doesn't go away if you ignore it. So you can push it aside because that particular project or that idea or that outcome or that political cycle or that thing doesn't allow for the complexity, or your budget doesn't, or your funding doesn't, but it doesn't go away if you just ignore it. And so we had learned really deeply in our time at Hub, for those of you who remember the radical childcare system labs and things that we did, that people really are absolutely incredible and smart, and you put the right things and tools and data and ideas in front of them, and they are in the best possible place to understand systems because they are closest to them. They have the lived and learned experience. So in my mind, nothing of the complexity that this was going to bring up would be too much for the population of Birmingham. The incredibly creative, imaginative, diverse population of Birmingham. Actually, what was going to be too much for them was to sit in rooms constantly and hear a few people who've been running the city well and not well for a long time, telling them it wasn't possible. So we just exited at that point, like completely exited from this idea that we'll do it from the city top down or like from the city upwards. We were like, let's do it the other way around. Let's go. We were moving out of the hub to, and these are some of the things that Kate showed on that day, some of the old slides. I just thought I'd bring that one up to say, like, your graphics are gone peng now, aren't they? These were the old days, and they were great then too, but just big up the graphic designers at Deal. And we were moving to neighbourhood, and we were looking to build civic and social infrastructure for communities to transition through the climate crisis. That's what we were looking to build. The things that you need in your neighbourhoods to be resilient, resourced, have agency at your doorstep, and then COVID hit. And suddenly we learned that, of course, the absolute resilience and connectivity and mutual aid was felt at that neighbourhood scale, at that street scale, a scale that anyone can relate with. Most people have a neighbour. Hopefully most of you have a street or a home or something you identify or belong with. And even some of the data was showing that even those in some of the worst financial situations actually did bypass some of the worst outcomes because of the social capital and mutual aid that they had in a place. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack there, by the way. That's not my only word on that, but I don't have time to talk about all of that. And so we were really interested actually in what it meant to build the infrastructure that supports this, all the incredible ideas from shared kitchens to growing spaces, to workspaces, to event spaces, to the things that help people to connect and so on and so on. And that's what we're busy doing at the moment. That's the place that we're hopefully going to transform into this wonderful, incredible example and demonstrator of, like the GPs are to the NHS, if we are going to go through this massive transition, we are going to need infrastructure at our doorsteps that make us strong, resilient, resourced, have agency and inspiration for the future. And the donut was just incredibly like relevant to this. And here's some of the tweets from that day. People were super excited and mind blown and everything, like you hopefully will be when you go away today. And that's when the work really starts. We weren't thinking about a 1 year or a 2 year or 3 year project grant. We were thinking about how do we put the donut and our place getting into the donut as the literal life's work. The next 10, 15, 20 years, a compass that we all relentlessly at every turn, creatively, rigorously, practically, strategically continue to move towards it. Not just because it's the donut. You could think about it in lots of different ways. Communities around the world have reimagined it. Indigenous communities in New Zealand have flipped around, having the planet at the center and people around the outside. It's not, you know, it's not like I've got some affiliation with the brand of donut economics. I say that to Kate all the time and she's like, good. It's this idea that that is the complexity that we do need to sit within. And that's the goal that we all need to be working towards. So we got to the neighborhood. COVID hit. Everything fell apart. The building, our funding for the building fell apart and we had to start again from scratch. So we started, and this is the bit that I just want to do the last few minutes on, to say that every single person in this room has a scale, a unit, a moment, a person that you can go and influence and start a ripple effect, whether that is in your home or whether that's that you sit over massive strategic goals and aims for the city. They all count. And I'm just going to quickly show you through what we then did instead of start from, can we persuade the decision makers, and how we started to co-create the donut, the data picture, and we'll be launching our version of this in July, which of course you'll be all invited to. So this is a school playground in Ladywood Estate. We started to do anything from using chalk and the Donut Dreams tools on the platform to start talking to children. They resonate with it immediately. 2 minutes. We've got people, we've got the planet, got a problem, not looking after either. Yeah, of course, that's it. Like, and then you just go. It really is that, like, it's literally, I have kids like, will come up and they'll say like, what's the donut? And I'll be like, so you know, we've got this planet, we've got lots of people, not really looking after the planet. I don't think we're really looking after people. Can you give me some examples? Bam, bam, bam. That's the donut. What we need to do is get into this bit, you know, where the sprinkles are. I'm not joking, that is literally the conversation. Joe's here from Civic Square. I mean, you'll hear, he can vouch for the ridiculous things that he's been part of in the last 6 months already that bring this to life. So it is that easy. So first of all, I want to say forget this idea that this is a big thing that nobody understands, because they really do. It is, Kate talks about it in the book on her talk, I think Deal have talked about it loads. Communities around the world have used circular images, metaphors to show how we need to be in a more holistic relationship with each other and the planet. We've been building structures like these grow rooms as metaphors, visual metaphors across the neighborhood. We're on to our third, I think we'll have 5 by the summer. These are little moments where people come together through gardening, ecological care, other things like that to start the conversation about the planet. We've been making and creating and playing. All of this is available to have a look at on our site. We've been doing, sorry, this is a bit slow, isn't it? We've been using principles of neighborhood science. Everyone's a scientist. Everyone can look at soil quality, water quality, energy efficiency of homes to start to understand the planetary boundaries in practice. How do we get children, intergenerational movements to be back in relationship with the land? Not an idea to solve, in relationship with their places, with their soil quality, with their air quality, with their water quality. And again, they pick it up instantly. We've been doing all sorts of things from drawing on streets and creativity and play and using lots of the things we already do, the gatherings we already have, in order to introduce these ideas in soft and everyday ways. I'm just going to stand here now because it's a bit slow to turn. We've been using the playbox that came down from Leeds to use all sorts of incredible, playful structures and metaphors over our summer holiday clubs to talk to children and then their parents and play and connect with them. And they resonate with the ideas immediately. We've been going deeper. We're working on a project with the Combined Authority and our partners at Dark Matter Labs, looking at how you retrofit streets. So those of you who are in the decarbonising agenda, it's not all just play and laughter. We're not just having a great time and think there's going to be no rigor and no actual pathways and no deep, big challenges like the 3 million homes we need to rapidly upgrade and currently are happening at a glacial pace. But that is part of being into the donut. So building those narratives for us is about looking at all the different projects and how we structure them. And then when people really struggle with the big complexity, we're able to say, this is what it means for us from all different angles, from different starting points, whether you're in policy or in strategy, or you're living in a home and you just want to make your front lawn more biodiverse. You have a place in this movement. You don't have to know it all to be able to start. We've been doing lots of things to spread the work. This is a program that we're doing with 120 people across the world in 12 learning groups in 120 neighborhoods across the world. That's the most next level book club we've ever put together. That's got half of really exploring the book chapter by chapter. The thing I want to say is when you look at the book, it is a masterpiece. And I'm glad Kate's not here because she'll think I'm bigging her up. It's a masterpiece in storytelling. 7 really clear chapters. You go through them one by one. We've been doing 1 chapter each. Joe went to Cheltenham a few days ago to visit the Planet Cheltenham crew. I was with the international neighbourhoods last night. The content people are engaging with like you wouldn't believe. Not like, I don't understand this. Bringing it to life in incredible ways. We'll be open sourcing all the way. You can run that group as well as part of Rob's book club stuff that he's been putting on the platform. And people are unpacking it. And then there's this magic 8th chapter where you graduate. We are all economists now. And then you go out in the world with some real incredible knowledge about the big things. But those 7 ways, once you actually start to break them down, you find yourself using them all the time. Yeah, that's why we need to change the goal. Yeah, and that's why we need to nurture human nature. Yeah, you use it all the time. So I would say, even if what you start is a tiny little book club on your street or in your house or with like 4 people sitting next to you, it is insatiable. It really is. And I don't say this about much. Those of you who know, I don't big up many things, but it is really wonderfully crafted to make it so easy to chunk into. And conveniently, there's 3-minute talks on every chapter. So you can just watch that YouTube one first, but you can interpret that creatively however you like. And here's a little example from the launch. And you'll be able to follow this along. And there'll be 2 big public showcases in the summer that you'd all be invited to. And finally, I want to just finish by saying, this is a big, deep, complex project we're working on with Dark Matter Labs that looks at open systems, finance, governance, retrofit at a scale that is just unreal. But Joe and Magda pop up in people's front gardens on the street. And what I'm trying to say is that whether you're starting from the responsibility of retrofitting Leeds or decarbonising transport, or you're thinking, I want to be part of this, but I have no idea how, I'm going to walk out into my front lawn and build a movement. There's a place for everyone, and that's the spirit you have to take forward. Otherwise, you're going to break each other with cynicism, and it's not possible, and the council this, and we need someone for that, and we need them to do this, and we need all of us. And it is about the donut, but it's about the climate crisis, and it's about something much deeper. And there is a space for everyone. And we've found over and over again that creativity, imagination, rigor, the scale of the crisis and the possibility have sat together beautifully, and people understand it. You just need to be confident, persist. And like Kate said, when you ask people about economics, it can feel scary. But when you ask them about donuts, well, there's nothing scary about donuts. And I definitely have to say that this has been one of the most incredible journeys of my entire life. And I really recommend that you pick this up and put it at the heart of whatever you're doing. And it will make it inevitably and just incredibly better. And I'm so grateful for another city in the country to be taking this, because we need you to help us a bit with our city council. They don't love us. All right, thanks a lot. Damn. Don't repeat that last bit, all right? Yo, don't repeat that last bit anywhere.
So Imi's going to be around the rest of the day. So there's going to be loads of chance to chat to her.
Joe's here, and we bought loads of our
Joe, do you want to stand up and just give everybody a wave?
Yeah.
There we go.
And we bought some of our tools and stuff, so you can come and look at them. Yeah.
Great. So we've only got minutes for a few questions now, but don't worry, there's going to be loads of chance to ask more questions. You've come up with a quote of the conference. I know we've still got a number of talks yet to go, but I'm afraid to say no one is going to beat. We need to get into the bit where the sprinkles are. So there we go. That is our guiding light for this event, the Leeds strategy of sprinkles. Because you can't have too many sprinkles or sparkle in life, can you really? Let's get to the questions. We'll take a few questions here, and then Connor, if you could be ready with a few questions from the Zoom as well. Let's take some questions here. So we'll go with Marvina first. Who else would like to ask a question? Alison here. Who else would like to ask a question? One more person? Okay, we'll just go with the two of you, if that's all right. If you want to just shout out your questions, and I'll repeat them for Zoom.
Yeah.
How important is it to go and make sure your conversation doesn't sit with the elites or the academic, because it's really
Yeah.
the privileges that these guys need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I do that one first, not to lose the depth of that question? And then, yeah. So the question was really about what it means to centre marginalised people, voices who not often at the quite white environmental movement. How important is that to us, and so on and so on. So two things. One is the first piece is, of course, that we have actually really purposely gone and embedded ourselves now in the neighbourhood. An inner city neighbourhood very similar to the one that many of us in the team grew up in, and we are there alongside, through the schools, through parents, through children, through living there as neighbours. And you'll see so much in our language and terminology, and how we try to think about practicing our behaviours. We're thinking about what it means to be a good neighbour. Second to that, people are not hard to reach, not at all, right? They're hardly reached, exactly right. So once you're there, and you're in the schools and you understand, and you're alongside neighbours, it's centering those voices and those relationships and the long, deep work. Not that like I'm going to run in and try and do one community engagement session. It just doesn't work like that. It will never work like that. That's where you've got to start from your streets up, wherever you live, whatever that demographic is, there will be something there for everyone. There'll be people who are socially mobile out of terrible situations. There'll be people still in them. There'll be people who'll be able to tell you about all sorts of different things that have happened in their lives. But secondly, what I was going to say was the framework, actually, this is one of the reasons why I really did get over my cynicism of it initially, because it was actually not me that reached out from the team. It was one of my co-founders, because once I saw these 4 lenses, it works really, really well. How can Leeds respect the health of the whole planet? Or what would it mean for Leeds to respect the well-being of all people? Allows you to go into complex, creative conversations about histories, extraction, how do we thrive here and respect the rights of the global south? You can blow open those questions to your context. And my personal advice is only personal, because Rob might have something else to say, is don't stay wedded. Keep the general themes of those questions, and then change the language, change it to what feels right about how you talk about global south and global north extraction. My parents are products of fleeing partition. Like, start with the points where you are and hack around with it. But the best thing about it is there's a place for us. The best then thing about it that I haven't seen in much else is that as you hack it and go all into the lenses that you want to take, whatever you want to center, the decolonial approaches, the approaches that are right to your community, to your histories, to your ancestors, to your futures, the best thing about it is then we can all still come back together, right? Because as long as you're in those general lenses, then we all just come back and we've got a global movement. And I think at the stage that we are at with the climate crisis in the UK, across the global north, we are going to have to agree on some stuff, right? And I have to say that I haven't seen something built this well that can allow you to hack it and go as far as you want, but then does bring you back into the general movement, because this is such a big thing to hack. So I quite like it, and the team are pretty cool as well.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for that. Very quick question here. Can I get you to hold on that while we just go over here? Thank you for that. When we just go over, can we just have a couple of questions, because we are running behind very quickly?
No questions actually at the moment, to be honest, just some general comments. Kate Locke saying absolutely gripping presentation, and that she's so inspired by the work and the energy at Civic Square. And also Tony from Together for Peace agreeing, saying fantastic vision, clarity, inspiration, really relevant to Climate Action Leeds and neighbourhood focus. So thanks very much.
Great, thank you. So people loving it, but if we could answer that question about the council.
Okay, that last thing I said, don't go all it. They dislike us because we've been around since we were quite young, and we don't really ask for permission, right? But look, my real deep opinion of this is it is too complex to put binaries on questions like this, right? But there's some tips I have. One reason why is because the council is all full of people that are going through all sorts of stuff and are being hammered by austerity, right? And are making impossible, ridiculous decisions. And there's a whole bunch of things that they are having to hold at the same time. And for that humanity, I have a lot of respect. How that all congregates into systems that make really contradictory decisions, I don't, right? And that's where I still think activism is a huge part. That's my personal opinion, and where Civic Square comes from. We happily welcome activism whenever it's required, however it's required, whether it's beautiful, whether it's gentle, whether it's... Our approach was to get enough of the people momentum, to keep good connections where we can with the council, to try and do some of the heavy lifting. But actually, when there are some real contradictory points, you need to build some actual resistance to that, right? And at the same time, I kind of want to put things on the table to be able to unlock their imagination, give them better choices, give them, when they are squashed, I want there to be a big movement of people who are like, we're ready for this. And we're trying to do it literally. Joe's working on one of our retrofit projects, which is a street, and he's galvanizing and working on what it means to build that street by street, and completely big and top down, and activism and creativity and imagination, they have to sit together. That's why all of you in this room are going to have to find different ways to have those conversations without killing each other's vibe as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're going to have to, because we're going to need each other.
A very, very clear message from you there about the fact we can do it, and it needs to be local and relevant to that. Imi, give a big round for Imi. And Imi, you're going to be around the rest of the day. So brilliant. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry to move you on. As always, we did have some more questions on Zoom, and I'm sorry we're not able to get to them. As always, too little time, too much to talk about. So we are going to move into the next section of the event before we then have some lunch. We say goodbye to Zoom. And of course, this afternoon when we come back, we're going to start testing this donut. We're going to start thinking about it much more in terms of testing what we can do with it in Leeds. But first, I want to hand over to three of the authors of the report. You should all have been given, is that right, copies of, have you all got a green document? Let's see, are people waving them? Yep, brilliant. We're now going to be told a little bit more about the Leeds Doughnut portrait report. The report's been put together by Paul Chatterton, Catriona Rawsthorne and Anisha Solanki. So I can welcome you to come along. Paul, are you going to be leading this? Yep, to talk us through the report. Now, you all right to head for still finishing at 1, because I'm so starving I can't last beyond 1 for my lunch. Is that all right? Yeah, all right, it's hungry too, we're all right. So let me hand over to you. Thank you.
Great, yeah, there is only just us between us and lunch. So yeah, I acknowledge that. I've got the clock, I've got it. So this is a wonderful moment where we've got 45 minutes and we're going to get through this, but what we're going to do is take you on a journey, a multimedia journey actually, because we've got lots of things going on here. We've got us, we've got Rob's amazing prop. He's pipe lagging in his tablecloth, so that's just magic. We're going to interact with that with blue tack, right? We've got the PowerPoint, and you've got your physical copy, right? So I think it's impossible to ignore what we're going to say in the next. We've also arranged for an airship to fly past with the results. We've changed John Lewis to John Doughnut for the day, and Leeds United to Leeds Doughnut. So we've really got the city covered, and the city's ours today, right? The city's ours. So the people that brought this together, we spent about the last 6 months doing this. Kat and Anisha was part of their master's dissertations with us at the University of Leeds, and Joel's also part of this. Also, hi to Joel, who's a climate researcher at the University of Leeds as well. So we've been looking at the different lenses together, but we're walking on the shoulder of giants here, right? Because there's so many amazing things that have come together. Jenny Bull's just arrived in the room, who's the designer of this report. Jenny Bull is officially the best designer on the planet. Like, no, at the galaxy. I mean, honestly, like, this is amazing. So big up to Jenny Bull. No, don't. Right, so that's amazing anyway. Thanks, Jenny. And Jenny Brooks has been tirelessly supporting us behind the scenes on doing loads of stuff and just like bringing it all together. It's absolutely amazing. Jonathan's our drawer and animator. So there will be an animation of this, a little kind of 2-3 minute genius clip that Jonathan's leading on. So watch this space over May, June, right? So we're trying to get out in lots of different formats so you can roll this out, yeah? So what we're going to do with this presentation, we can send you this, and on the website, you can read the long and the short report, right? Because the long report is lurking around. That's all. If you're into kind of like, ooh, what do they mean? Is there a fact behind that? It's in here, and you can look into that, yeah? So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a journey through the report to some highlights. So we're not going to highlight every dimension because there's like nearly 40, yeah? And we would be here till tea time, and I would just like collapse out of hunger myself anyway. So we're going to just pick on 3 in each lens, right? And we've got some lovely cutouts, which one of us is going to stick on there. And we've got a cool interactive PowerPoint, which we can send you can use in your communities, you can change and all that kind of stuff. So the unrolling thing, we set Rob and Leonora a challenge, like, no, you've got to unroll it, because it's kind of like we made it into a path. So the big thing for us, right, is like, how can this donut unrolled be a journey, right? How can we use it as a path, right, that has quite clearly a ceiling, which we mustn't, overshoot, and a floor, which we mustn't fall below. And this decade of transformation, which I started on today, is really powerful metaphor, because it's a 10-year journey, right? And it's a journey we've been on for decades or even centuries anyway. But we've got this kind of pathway to walk through, which has a clear set of dimensions, this ceiling and this floor. And for us, I think it's a powerful conversation starter. Yeah. So and it's got these 4 questions which we've refined ourselves in Leeds, but those are the 4 questions we ask as we walk. Yeah, asking we walk is a really powerful metaphor. It's like, on our journey, let's have a conversation about changing this city. Yeah, let's not talk and then move. Let's like talk and act as we move. That's a really powerful way to think about what we're trying to do here in Leeds and other cities. And so you've got the donut. So I'm not really going to labour this because we go into a little bit in the long report and the short report, but we've got to understand the donut, and we're all coming up with amazing ways to express this kind of like metaphor of the ceiling and the floor and the donut and roll. So take that and play with it, and maybe over lunch, and especially the workshop this afternoon, give us some feedback on what works for you, how you might think about taking it forward. Today's all about social innovation, right? About how we can use it going forward as a set of ideas, right, to intervene in the city. Because I'm hoping in the room, you know, we've got representatives from the public sector, the private sector, the community sector, the third sector, the research sector. The key thing is all those sectors have got to work together, right, to create this new story and reality of Leeds, right? So this is our journey. This is the journey that we asked Jenny Bull to conceive. So there's people walking along it, and the overall journey, right, is how do we create this safe and thriving place for all, right, with the ceiling and the floor. That's the journey we're on, right? And so the task we set ourselves was like, well, how's Leeds doing against that? So as you start that journey, there are the first set of questions you come across. Remember those ones about local aspirations. What's happening locally, right? Are we looking after each other? Are the people of Leeds thriving? And how's nature? You know, how are we looking after local nature? Are we supporting it in return? Is nature supporting us? Yeah, right. So that's, are we meeting our local aspirations? Those 2 key questions. And we continue on our journey, and you must also ask these other two questions. You can't just ask 2 or 1 or 3. You've got to ask all 4. That's the key bit of the donut. You must ask all these 4. Then we get to global responsibilities. Life in Leeds. Take life in Leeds. What kinds of impacts are we having as a result in life in Leeds on people across the world? As a result of all the things that we rely on in life in Leeds and the planet and the health of the planet. So these 4 questions together are really key on our journey. Yeah. Right. So the other thing we were like, we can't just start talking about this journey because the journey's been going on for forever, right? So like where have we come from as a city? So that's one of the key things. And in the report, we highlight some positives and some less positive things, right? And I think that's really important, isn't it? Because basically Leeds is one of the leaders of the Industrial Revolution, right? Some great innovation, some great wealth building, some great infrastructure that was laid down, yeah? Leeds came together as a city through that Industrial Revolution. But of course, Leeds is not an island. You know, that Industrial Revolution and before that was part of a social and political process across the world, right? Linked to some of the things that Imi's been saying about colonialism, extractivism, and that was the origins, that was the seeds of our high levels of carbon emissions in the atmosphere from 1760 onwards. So Leeds has had its fair share in terms of carbon emissions. What do we do with that in terms of things like climate justice, in terms of fair shares, in terms of what we do, in terms of our global responsibilities going forward, yeah? And it's a really important part of the story. But Leeds is a diverse city with great sectors, with many people, with many resources, with a council who's kind of up for it, with a private sector that's big and social entrepreneurs. So we have an amazing stock of resources and people and assets, yeah? So that's one of the great things about Leeds, and that's what we highlight in the report, and that's what we want you all to think about. Like, how do you explain that history, explain and bring that history of your place and Leeds into that? So knowing where we've come from is super important in terms of explaining where we might go, yeah? Right, so let's have a little look at the 4 lenses. We're going to do one each. Kat really led on the local social and dissertation. One of our authors isn't here, Irena Bauman, so she led on the local ecological, so I'll cover that. Anisha covered global social, and Joel covered global ecological, right? So we kind of teamed up and looked at different lenses. We're just going to highlight a few here. Who's going to do the blue tacking of the? You're going to do that. I'm going to press buttons and Kat's going to talk, and then we're going to keep swapping. So let's see how it goes. We're not going to pick on all of them because we'll blow our time.
Hi. So now we're moving on to the first question on the journey to a safe and thriving Leeds, which looks at our local aspirations for local social life in the city. Here we ask, how can people in Leeds thrive? What does it mean for people of Leeds to live well? This question speaks to local policy across Leeds. What is the city's ambition for people to live well? What does that actually look like? And how are we doing in relation to this currently? So we use 16 social dimensions, which largely reflect the areas of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And yeah, this is the question that we've explored. So as you can see in the reports in your hands or in the online version for those online, social life in the city's ambition is bold and inspiring. The ambition, which we've taken directly from Leeds City Council's publicly available strategy documents, is one where people can afford good quality housing, which they can afford to keep warm. People have good quality jobs and financial resources to support themselves and their family. There isn't health inequality. Leeds is a city that is inclusive, where people feel safe, are connected and engaged in their local communities. And I think we can all agree that this sounds like an ambition for a thriving city. But currently, social life in Leeds on the whole doesn't match up to this ambition. As you'll see, many people across the city have fallen below the social floor in almost all the dimensions that we looked at. So let's take a look at how we're doing. So I won't, as Paul said, touch on everyone. We'll just draw on a few illustrative examples. But as you can see, we've got the social floor, and we've created a threshold for what we've kind of subjectively judged as a safe and just level against each of the dimensions that we looked at. And this is a live conversation. This was really tricky for us to do throughout the report. And so we'd like to hear feedback on, what do you define against each dimension as that safe and just level for the city? So the first one, we looked at housing, and we looked at house price to income ratio. And you can see the red wedge below signifies the extent to which, according to the data available, we're falling below that threshold that we've set against each dimension. So I won't talk much more about this one. So the second dimension we looked at is energy. And for this, we looked at fuel poverty in the city. So Leeds' ambition is for all homes in the city to be homes where everyone can afford to stay warm. So we found that 16.8% of Leeds households are in fuel poverty in 2019. Clearly, this significantly falls below our proposed minimum social floor of 0 households in Leeds experiencing fuel poverty. So we'll move on now through some of the other examples. So for water, we looked at water poverty, and the data wasn't available at the Leeds level. So as you can see with the different shaded wedge, we use that from the Yorkshire scale. For food, again, our indicators were largely led by the data that was available. So this is something that really needs to be developed as we take this project forward. So for food, we looked at the amount of food parcels provided by Trussell Trust across the city. Next, we've got health. And health is a big one for the city. It's one of the 3 strategic pillars for the council. And so Leeds City Council's aim for the city is one where people who are the poorest improve the health the fastest. And we found in the data that in the most deprived areas of Leeds, people live an average of 10.5 years less than those in the least deprived. Now, this falls below our proposed social floor of 2 years, which is based on best case examples from across the UK. So as we move on, I can't see the screen. Yeah, so the next one is jobs. And we looked at the amount of people, working age adults working for a wage less than the national living wage. And next we have education, and we looked at young people in full-time education and training. Community, we looked at Leeds resident satisfaction with their local area as a place to live. For mobility, we looked at road accidents resulting in death or serious injuries. And for peace and justice, we looked at residents feeling safe in their communities. Now for this one, the council aims for everyone in Leeds to be safe and feel safe. And a recent survey found that 84% of Leeds residents feel safe in their community. Our minimum social floor aims for everyone to feel safe in line with the city ambition. And therefore this still falls short of the goal, but it's, you know, an area that the kind of safe and just space is within reach according to that indicator. So for culture, again, using the data that was available, we could see that actually we are in the safe and just space for that. And we looked at Leeds City Council's museums and cultural spaces. For social equity, we looked at child poverty. For income, we looked at in-work poverty across the city. Again, you can obviously see this in the report, the data are matching to each of the indicators. For political voice, we looked at voter turnout in local elections. For equality and diversity, we looked at hate crime across the city. And finally, for connectivity, we looked at residents without basic digital skills. And again, the data at the Leeds level wasn't sufficient. So we've taken that broader look at Yorkshire and the Humber. So it's important to kind of note that this isn't just a picture of Leeds. This is a familiar picture and portrait for cities up and down the UK. It's a thing that we know all too well. And it's important to highlight that we know that Leeds is not an island. We know that Leeds sits in the national context, as we've talked about many times today, and that not all the levers are in the city. As Imi pointed out several times, it's really important that we stop and think, you know, what can we do? And how do we push for that change? You know, that we need to reverse this story and push those wedges back into the safe and just space of the city. So yeah, I think I'm passing on to Paul for the next slide.
And that's a really important, yeah. That's a really important point that Kat makes there, that like all cities, this is quite a sobering portrait of Leeds, but it would be represented in more cities around the world. So there's something going on at a broader level, and the donut economics approach allows us to think, what's the bigger change we need to make rather than tinkering at a city level? There's something bigger going on here. And there's a national and international story we need to tell right within our neighbourhoods, rather than saying, no, it's the council's fault, because, you know, like they do have limited resources, and they have weathered, you know, 10, 15 years of austerity. What Anisha's been doing, by the way, so actually, if everyone just turns to their left, actually, you know, we're just trying to explore different ways of presenting this. You know, one thing you could do in your communities or sectors or neighbourhoods, you know, we just thought, well, let's make those little red wedges out of paper and stick them on. So we've just stuck a few on there, look. So Anisha's been sticking those on. And you could play around with that, right? Because what we thought is really cool is if you get bits of paper to represent these, and you could literally make your own social floor and stick them on, because if you do it in the donut, you kind of got to stick them in the middle, it's a bit fiddly. But if you make it like literally a floor, a foundation, you can start to stick them below. So we've only done 3 there, but you could make them all, couldn't you? You know, and you could play with that, which is quite cool. So yeah, that note on method's really important, because when you read the longer report, I mean, this is only a limited snapshot. We've only taken one indicator for each of these areas, right? And, you know, you would have to like look across several indicators to get a really rounded sense of what's going on. So when Kat and I were doing this, we're back and forth for months, like, oh, what indicator should we use? You know, and then like, what should we set as a social floor? And, you know, it's an enticing question. And you can ask yourselves this in your localities, in your places, you know. So this is more of an invitation for you to think about, well, what is it? What is an acceptable social floor, right? What should we be aiming for in terms of child poverty, in terms of connectivity, in terms of road deaths, in terms of any of the indicators, right? What is an acceptable foundation, an acceptable floor, which would allow us to like thrive and be safe? So Kat and I found ourselves in these conversations saying like, well, should there be no deaths or should there be some deaths? And it's like, can you believe we're even asking those questions? You know, because like, so the council has to really take this on and set bold policy in these different areas as targets, and then create an action plan to aim for them. So these are the challenges. And then when you multiply it across the 4 lenses, it becomes an absolute, you know, task, right? So that's where we're at, and that's a really exciting bit. So then we head to the next question, local ecology. And this is what our colleague architect and ecologist Irena Baumann worked on. So really exciting. And this is one of the possibly the less developed areas. So if anyone in the audience wants to really take this up, landscape architects, you know, designers, ecologists, Brilliant, bring it on, because we want to connect with you. So are we supporting and protecting local nature? You know, what's going on? Because look, a city is not just full of people and buildings, it's full of nature, it's full of ecosystems, air, water, carbon, you name it, right? Which supports our life. We kind of know that. But how are we as the apex species looking after that? Because if we don't look after it, it won't look after us, okay? So the donut approach looks at a number of different areas, land, water, air, principally, but you can break that down into other things, because land does things like sequesters carbon, supports biodiversity, and harvests energy. So you can see those in the report, yeah? So there's 4 in the report. We're just gonna and this is all about the ecological ceiling and the local ecological ceiling. How are we doing, yeah? Are we overshooting that local ecological ceiling? What we know, look around us, I mean, Leeds' skyline is full of cranes, right? So one of the things, and this is no different to Birmingham, I imagine, or other cities, Sheffield, Liverpool, I imagine, well, possibly slightly more cranes in Leeds at the moment, because we're in the middle of a post-pandemic, if that's the right time, development boom, right? Leeds is in a development boom. What does that mean for local people and nature is really important, right? Across all the 4 lenses. So if we just took one, which is the land one, let's just focus on one aspect of that, which is the carbon sequestration, right? One big thing we can do with land, right, is promote biodiversity and the stock of trees on that land. And one of the key things we can do with that land is sequester carbon, store carbon, right, through trees. We've put this in the red. We haven't quantified these, because it's quite difficult to quantify how many trees should Leeds have, right? What percentage of tree cover should a city have? I mean, these are questions that come up. So like suddenly we should say to Leeds City Council, well, you've got this amazing tree strategy, but like, what should we be aiming for? So the aim is to double the amount of area, a tree canopy area, right? So, but, you know, is that good enough? Will that tackle the climate and nature emergencies? And will that bring enough well-being to people, right? So they've got an amazing strategy, but it's right at the beginning of it. You've probably all seen those tree forests, future forests in your local park that are popping up all over Leeds, yeah? And the next one is water. It's a key issue in Leeds because of flooding. So you can't just see it there, but like 11,000 properties in Leeds prone to flooding. We've got a really ambitious flood management scheme in Leeds. But is it basically, is it going fast enough? Are we doing well enough to protect houses? Yeah. The third one's air quality. Air quality is really important, right? It sustains us. The cleaner the air, the healthier we are, right? There's a public health crisis around poor air quality, especially in Leeds with high levels of vehicles, right? Petrol and diesel cars. So we know that. Leeds has got an ambitious, again, a very ambitious strategy, but it's yet to be realised, right? We do meet current World Health Organization targets for air pollution, but the voluntary, more stringent WHO targets, we do not. Right, so we'll have to keep a watching brief on that. We know there's hotspots, right? We're next to a major A road, which shouldn't be there right outside this building, for example. And then the final one is matter, recycling, because nature does a great job, right? The idea of waste doesn't exist in nature. How do we use that nature to create a circular economy in the city? So some real local ecological challenges, right? Which we outline in the report, and which are really want to weave that together, those two local stories, the social and the ecological, right? Supporting each other. Okay.
I feel like one of these hopefuls on the X Factor, trying to figure out if I can use the mic. So this is the global social lens, as Paul sort of alluded to at the beginning. And I guess the crux of this is really about uncovering Leeds' global interconnection. So examining what is Leeds' relationship with the rest of the world and all the people that live in it. And it's sort of, it's a concept we can all get our heads around, the food that we eat, the clothing we wear, the materials that we use in our everyday lives. They don't just materialize at the border, and they've come from somewhere, they've come from a place, and they've come from the people that live in those places. And yeah, all of those people have hopes and dreams and lives and problems and happiness, and that's what we're trying to get at with this lens. And it's also not usually part of sort of city planning processes and policy making, because it's quite a big thing to get your head around, and it can be really overwhelming at times, but this is what we're trying to break down a little bit with this lens and the research that we did. And another thing that's quite important to mention is sort of, as Imi has mentioned, and as Paul sort of alluded to earlier, is we've come from a long history of the sort of economics and industries that sort of caused by colonialism and, yeah, I think we've discussed this a lot. Like, how do you talk about that in a way that doesn't intimidate people or scare people or turn people off or polarize people? But it is important to consider these legacies that we have and the impacts they have on everyone, not just people living in different parts of the world, but us too. So yeah, if we go into some of the dimensions, one of the things we looked at was child labor. In 2018, there were more than 21,000 child laborers in the global supply chains that result from the goods and services that we consume in Leeds, which is a pretty horrific thing to think about. And I don't think anyone would like to think about, you know, the things that they use in their daily lives coming from kids, you know, making them. But yeah, that's just the fact of the matter. If we go on to the next one, we also looked at things like air pollution, sort of impact on the way we live our lives in Leeds, on air pollution around the world, in addition to just locally. There's also something like 1,700 forced labourers in the sort of supply chains that feed into Leeds. And we also looked at goods and services and sort of the impact they have on people in their actual workplaces. So I think it's something like, yeah, 25 workplace fatalities and over 13,000 injuries a year in the workplaces where people provide the goods and services that we then consume here. And if you go on to the next one, yeah, that's forced labour. And I think the next one that we were going to look at was land use. So it's something like 500,000 hectares of cropland and grazing land is needed to support the goods and services that we consume in Leeds. And for context, that is twice the size of the Yorkshire Dales. So quite a lot of land. Yeah, and there's a few other things that we looked at. I think the main thing to say here is, of course, none of us intend to have these impacts on people living around the world. And I'm sure no one in this room or anyone would say that this was their intention. But I think that's why it's important to always have this in mind and recognize these impacts and remind ourselves that we do have to take some sort of accountability for that in healthy and productive and engaged ways. And there is a way that we can work together to tackle these problems. And also to start to dismantle some of the systems that brought them about in the first place. Sort of, you know, climate justice and social justice do really go hand in hand. And this is what we tried to sort of conceptualize with this lens. And I'll hand over to Joel, who's going to talk us through the last one.
Right, hello. Are we on the right slide here? So yeah, finally moving on to the global ecological, which overlaps quite a lot with what Anisha was already talking about. And maybe the first thing to do is unpick what we mean by global in the context of global ecological. So maybe it's easiest to think like we can hear a bunch of cars outside at the moment, and they're all emitting, most of them are going to be emitting carbon dioxide from their exhaust pipes, and that will go into the air, and that will contribute to global heating, which will cause impacts in other parts of the world. So on the one hand, yeah, we have a very globally interlinked ecological system, and we contribute to that in Leeds. On the other hand, those cars are driven by people in Leeds, but most of them were manufactured in different countries. That metals were extracted to build those cars in different countries. There'll be plastic bits in those cars that probably came from China, and then maybe they went to Germany where the car was manufactured, and then that came over here. So yeah, so there's the fact that the global ecology is interlinked, and there's the fact that supply chains are globalized. So that's really what we're looking at with the global ecological lens. The second thing to mention first is really here we're building upon a lot of other work that's done in Leeds and that's been done at Leeds University and various other places. There's been a lot of work done on what's normally called footprinting at the national level. So people look at carbon footprints or material footprints of nations. So that is taking this supply chain perspective and then looking at the impacts of a country globally. So with that in mind, we looked at 7 indicators for this section. All but one of those we found to be overshooting planetary boundaries currently, or Leeds' impacts are currently overshooting planetary boundaries. We'll just look at 3 for now on this slide. First one being carbon emissions, the one that's talked about the most. So in Leeds, the average Leeds resident is roughly 6 times over what you could consider the safe global planetary boundary for carbon, or for all greenhouse gas emissions, that is. And then we're moving on next.
So big, the exceedance, the cat cannot even get it above the ceiling.
Ah, yeah. And I'm not even sure that's the indicator that exceeds planetary boundaries the most. I think that's actually fertilizer, from what I remember. So then if we move on to, and this is where you start to see the overlap with what Anisha's done, we can also look at land use. We looked at the ecological footprint in particular. And on that indicator, the average person in Leeds is exceeding the safe planetary boundary by just over a factor of 2. So maybe to distinguish this a little bit from the social, the global social lens, in the global social, we were looking at more specifically trying to look at arable land use in other countries. So we could say that Leeds effectively consumes food and other biomass from a lot of arable land in Africa, for example. And obviously we have massive problems with hunger in Africa. Well, we're appropriating a lot of the resources that come from their arable land. For the global ecological, we were looking more broadly at what's our total ecological footprint per person here, and how does that compare to the whole planet's global ecological capacity. Finally, we also looked into the material footprint, or at least that's the final one we'll mention for today. And in this case, Leeds was, I can't remember exactly, I think we're nearly a factor of 2 over the safe planetary boundary. So on average, this is quite hard to visualize, but on average, in an average year, typical Leeds resident consumes just over 13 tons of material. So that includes various types of biomass, which is your food and clothing and other things like wood used in products. It includes fossil fuels. It also includes non-metallic minerals, is what they're specifically called, which is largely cement and concrete. And then also your metals as well. So those are the 4 things that make up a material footprint. And 13.2 tons per person in just 1 year is pretty colossal. And yeah, like I say, about double the planetary boundary. The final thing to mention maybe is we also looked at inequality in this global ecological lens. So carbon is a good example. Although the average person is, like I say, about 6 times over this safe planetary boundary, if you look at the poorest 20% in Leeds, their carbon footprint is about 3 or 4 times less than the richest 20%. And I think that means the poorest 20%, that's still over a safe planetary boundary by about a factor of 3. But then the richest 20% end up over that safe planetary boundary by about a factor of 11, from what I remember. And I think this is something that, yeah, really needs to be talked about more. I think it's becoming more on the agenda, but yeah. So that's the end. Case closed. I mean, that's a good hint for me to stop talking, I suppose. The last thing to say is probably, unlike the other lenses, it's really hard to know where to start with changing these things at the Leeds level. For a lot of other things, as the other speakers have mentioned, Leeds has targets. And the question is, how do you get there? Are we getting there? Are we moving in the right direction? When it comes to global ecological impacts, I mean, don't quote me on this, but I'm not sure there's any country yet even has a target for its consumption-based emissions. Almost all carbon emissions targets that we talk about are based upon the emissions from the country, which is convenient for rich countries, of course, because then we don't account for the things we import. So the big challenge is even like, how do we get targets on the agenda for these sorts of impacts? The other issue is, how do we measure these things accurately? We've done a kind of first effort here of quantifying them, and I think that's probably useful enough. Like you could easily say, well, we can't measure it accurately enough, so let's not worry about it. But you know, we kind of have a good idea that we're not doing well. So yeah, often the discourse around these things turns into like individual change. So like eat less meat, drive less, etc. And I don't want to say those things aren't important, but there's so much more to do. And And that's where, yeah, I'm only really good at putting together some rough numbers. I don't know how to change things, so I'll leave that to everyone else.
I mean, so it's a really important analysis, and Joel's and his colleagues have been like drawing down big global data sets, refining them and making them relevant to Leeds, and refining them in that sense so that you know, we can engage with the communities on that level. How do you downscale this stuff from Leeds to neighbourhoods or to other cities? Because I think this kind of portrait, even though it's a baseline, even though it's based on selected indicators, it's quite a powerful tool to engage with policymakers in the private sector. Because, you know, just to reinforce some of the points that are emerging, that what we don't want to do is everyone to rush out thinking, how can I now get 13 tons of metal out of my life? And like, you know, that's the issue is here, not to individualize this too much, yeah? That like there's bigger things going on at play that the city's responsible for, that the private sector's responsible for, that the nation's responsible for. How do we start to have those kinds of conversations to bring our lives? We individually can't get back into the donut just by us acting, right? So it's a bigger collective effort. That's why we set up Our Future Leeds. That's why we set up Climate Action Leeds. That's why we're engaging with you today, right? So here's a kind of composite. Here's a kind of like the two lenses together. That's a social floor. That's a local social lens, and that's the global ecological lens stuck together. We don't have those boundaries for the others because it's difficult to quantify them in terms of boundaries. But it's a sobering picture, and it's one we've created as a composite. We want you to use it. We'd love you to kind of like explore what that means for your levels. But what next? Well, we've got the rest of the day about what's next. Really, you know, where does this go, right? We've heard from Imi, we've heard from Leonora. Everyone's like fired up and understands how to use this. We've got the deal community to support us. We've got an immense amount of resources and energy behind this, yeah? But what does your city portrait look like? What would you do with it? So lots of things we can do today. We're going forward with Climate Action Leeds. We've got 3 and a bit years left around funded. So we're not going anywhere. There's Jenny, there's myself, there's Andy, there's Stella, there's a lot of people I shouldn't mention, like around the room, people with Climate Action Leeds t-shirts on. And yeah, so I'm just getting to that. Yeah, so the 2 big things we're working on. So Andy's doing the kind of like city hub in the city centre where we can like start to bring some of this stuff together in a public place. We've got Together for Peace, who are working in different communities, and people like Sue and other kind of community workers here working directly with those communities. How can we then take this model out to the communities? We'll hear from Shannon in Otley this afternoon. How can we start to like the things that Marvina's mentioned? We'll hear from Marvina this afternoon. Make this relevant and use it to empower young people and their story of the city, yeah? The legacy of the adult world and previous generations and what they're going to have to live with over the next decades. And then we've got Maya and her team at Tidal looking at the transition partners, 7 or 8 sectors across Leeds, like things like housing, energy, transport, food, waste, but also really importantly, kind of climate and race justice. How do we use this understanding to supercharge some of those transitions in particular sectors? Yeah. So we've got a plan. We want you to join us on that plan. And it's a broader city planning process. And we believe and we understand that the donut is a brilliant tool and starting point for that process. Yeah. We want to change this city within 10 years. We can't be having this conversation again in 2030. We can't get together in like 2032 and go, how's it been the last 10 years? You know, we have to make significant, remember those messages from the global scientific community, immediate, large scale, far reaching change. They haven't just said that just because they thought it was a good, interesting thing to say. The global scientific community have been looking at this stuff for decades and decades and decades. No one's been listening, and they keep putting out more and more words. They've run out of kind of adjectives now to actually like get people to act, right? So I think we have to take that on. We have to push that up. And I think that's why the donut stuff is so important, because it's a tool for pushing up. It's a tool for engaging. It's getting into the sparkles. It's a tool that works. And it's a brilliant starting point. Yeah. So we've got a plan. We want to hear your plan. We want to make a joint plan. We don't want to say to the council, we've got a plan, you've got a plan, you know, 2 plans. We want to like join and say, look, what's your planning process? How are you going to change transport, housing, energy, food, like Neil was alluding to, and work with them? How do we harness the private sector and the social entrepreneurs in this city? Yeah. How do we harness the third sector, communities, religious groups, community groups, sports groups? Yeah. How do we do that across all the different sectors in the city? So that's where we want to get to. That's the conversations we want to start, right? And the key thing is, like, I walk around Leeds now going, is that a donut activity? I was stuck in traffic as I was cycling this morning. It's like, not very donut, this is it. And like, you know, so there's like, what feels a bit donut to you in Leeds and what feels a little bit less donut, yeah? And I think that's the kind of key thing now, isn't it? It's like, how do we move Leeds towards the donut, yeah? What kind of activities feel a bit more donut than others, and how do we supercharge them? How do we support them and amplify them and give voice to them? Because that's what we're doing here, right? We're scanning, horizon scanning across Leeds, who's doing amazing stuff, who wants a bit of a platform, a voice that I'd like to, and support in terms of what they're doing, yeah? And what feels a bit prickly and a bit wrong, and how can we kind of encourage them to change and get into the donut? How do we create, Leeds City Council have got this new vision, this new best city plan, and these 3 big strategic aims around climate emergency, health and well-being. What is it? What's the other one? Yeah, that one. Who was it? Inclusive growth, right? Yeah, how could we forget that one? So the interesting one is that I think I've kind of donated it out of my mind. It's like, so like one of the key things that we can have I fell into the hole of the donut. That's what it is, isn't it? It's the middle of the donut, and it's like, how do we then have a conversation about what the council mean by inclusive growth? Yeah, and like, what does that mean for a safe and thriving future? Right. So it's a starting conversation. Yeah, what do we mean by growth in this city? And there's some wonderful colleagues at Leeds. I know Milena's here who does loads of stuff on like this kind of stuff, and like there's a wealth of resources and understanding in the city on this stuff. Okay, so there's loads for us there. We've possibly got 4 minutes, 10 seconds for questions. Is that all right?
Hey. Great, thank you. Because Zoom are going, let's go to the Zoom first. Connor, have we got some questions or comments on the Zoom?
No questions in particular, just people talking about a lot of the activities taking place in Leeds. There's particularly with urban growing food growing movements in Leeds, things like, you know, Kirksall Valley and Meanwood Valley Farm too. Someone posting just in now. Fiona's asking, the section on are we supporting and protecting local nature needs more thought and work. Said it appeared to be lacking on a focus on protecting biodiversity. We're losing huge amounts of biodiversity in our city due to infrastructure development, etc. The flood scheme is about controlling nature and protecting houses/businesses, not nature. Biodiversity net gain has been described by Friends of the Earth as a license to trash nature. How can we develop these discussions?
Great. Thank you very much. Let's get some more questions and you can take them all together, Paul, if that's all right. So who would like to ask a question? We've got one here. Who else would like to ask a question? One here and one more. One more and one here as well. So if you want to ask a question. Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about choosing the metrics for the different boundaries and choosing the legislation. I suppose I'm just quite interested in who has a voice in that, and it might be involved in something like, I mean, I guess if it's the same for each of these 4 segments, and something like juries can be ways of doing that. And I suppose I also wondered if the biggest citizen jury in Wales on climate needs is climate commission things.
Great, thank you. To repeat for Zoom, that's a question about who chooses the metrics. Here in Leeds, we have things like the Climate Commission, also citizens' juries, a question there on that. We had another question here. Do you want to?
Yeah, hi. So I work at Arrow, which is a engineering consultancy in Leeds. And I can see quite clearly how like the local just like a bit of a broad question, what do you see as the role of private business in this Leeds how private business engage in this and start
I think that's a really great question. Thank you so much for asking that. That's about the role of private business in the donut and in any action plan going forward. And then we had one more, I think, here.
Made to actually making sure that the plans that happen in this space and all the citizens that are involved throughout the project lifetime are actually then put into action plans.
Great, thank you so much. And that's a question there about what plans the council may or may not have around actually putting some of the aims into action plans. So Paul, you've got nature and biodiversity, metrics, who chooses, citizens, juries, links to the Climate Commission. What's the role of business, and what the council doing around actually putting the commitments into plans? There you go, take it away.
10 seconds on each, yeah, and I'll bring other people want to say something as well, yeah? Yeah, so basically, yeah, nature and biodiversity has been squeezed. There's a development model in Leeds that we have to create a narrative around. I think we need to work with our nature and transition partner, Pete's here, right? And create that narrative around the development model in Leeds and the pinch points around it. We absolutely must do that. Okay, there needs to be a really clear nature and biodiversity plan for Leeds, which we don't have. The local plan update is happening. Martin Elliott's leading it. That's a pinch point. We really need to push on that hard, but it's not going to come into play till 2024. There's a whole year of pipeline developments in place. We need to push hard on this one because our local ecology is being squeezed massively. Yeah, we're totally aware of that as a pinch point. The second one was yeah, brilliant. So let's crowdsource those. We just arbitrarily chose one for each, right? Because we just had to get somewhere. Well, we chose it where the data was, and we chose it where we had a decent, we could create a narrative around a boundary, right? So over to you lot, we'll do some more work, but we want to support people to say, what's a basket of indicators we could push together to create a more complex story? Yeah, so absolutely, that's the next step.
Role of private business?
Just on that one quickly, this is the start of a broader city planning process, which you'll hear more about from here. So this is just the starting point, the springboard for that conversation. And a lot of that will be a lot of the stuff that we saw in Civic Square with Imi. It's kind of going into the working with communities. What indicators do they feel represents certain dimensions in their life? What's important to them? And layering up, this is just a data portrait. It tells such a tiny percentage of what we're talking about. And so it's about building on this and building the layers that really add the value. We see this as just the starting point. So yeah, crowdsourcing those metrics through that city planning process.
Let's make it, that's one of the key things we want to make sure we do, yeah. On the business stuff, talk to also Rob and Leonora, because they've got a business kind of outreach person, but I think, what we need to do is supercharge the big business world into this, things like B Corps, those new kinds of company certifications that are pushing corporations into new directions. We've got really great social entrepreneurs in the city like Rob, who are pushing out Social Entrepreneur Foundation, but we need to pull, kicking and screaming the big corporations into this. They have to be part of the story. Wealth, employment, investment, right? It's not going to go anywhere. We need to direct it into the donut. That's what we need to do, yeah? And we need a social charter on how corporations operate in our city, right? And then I think the final one was around...
which was about the council commitments in terms of planning.
That's one thing we need to do. So as part of Climate Action Leeds in the city planning process, we, with the transition partners, we're going to go to them and say, look, we've got this planning process going, we've got the donut, we've got these ambitions to do community plans and transition plans. We don't want to just do this in parallel. We want to embed it in your work. So when we're doing our stuff, it's not just a nice to have, it influences, embeds in your strategies on food, waste, housing, transport, or whatever. We must get to that point. And so I think we're going to have a conversation about how to do that over the next 6 months. This event is part of this event is our kind of climate assembly we have every 6 months. We're going to have one again in October around that time. And at that time, there's going to be 6 months of work, which will be that kind of thing where we can start to report on how we're getting that out. Yeah. So I think that's our next 6 months journey, which we want you to join us on. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Can we just say a massive thank you, therefore, to Paul, to Catriona, to Anisha, to Joel. Thank you for that. And also for writing the report, not just the presentation. Come on, keep going, because they've done all that research, got that information, put it together. Great. Thank you all so much. Can I say I'm loving the clapping at this event, because I think it's bringing a real energy to the room as well. It's lovely. And let's face it, we're going to need all the motivation and encouragement and niceness from each other to actually make these things happen, aren't we? So brilliant for that. We've come towards lunchtime. This means now we are saying goodbye to our Zoom room. Oh, we're going to miss you. Thank you to everybody who has taken part in the Zoom room. Connor, do we have any final comments or thoughts from the Zoom room?
Just a lot of people saying thanks, they really enjoyed the event. Thanks to all the speakers. One final comment saying tree planting in Leeds is, alas, merely greenwash and excuse to fill trees elsewhere. Just yeah, just general comments about what's been talked about and, you know, ways of going forward. But yeah, just generally, thanks a lot for the event and thanks to everyone who participated and speakers and all that.
Great, thank you. Well, goodbye, Zoom. It's been lovely having you, and we'll hope to see you soon. Great, thank you very much. Those of you who are still wandering around, if you could head back quietly, that would be great. So we are now into the afternoon session. This is normally the point at which we have what we call a sugar slump. Of course, there's no sugar slump for you because there wasn't anything sweet, was there? So nobody falling asleep at this point. That normally happens at events. This is I'm going to tell you, this is a true thing, actually. It's an old trick. If you ever go into a radio station and or TV and they want you to be quite active and it's at one of those slumping points of the day, if they serve you donuts and cakes at that point, right, know that they're trying to get sugar in you to make you liven up a little bit, because we do know that sugar does make us do that, but it also makes us slump about 10-15 minutes later. So anyway, we're going to now go into our afternoon session. We're going to start getting a bit more practical. We're going to think about how we can apply this, and we're going to think about testing this donut concept. We're going to be testing the sprinkles, because as we remember, this is all about how you get to the bit with the sprinkles, of course. So to help us before we go into our workshops and to help us start the conversation, we've got two speakers this afternoon. We've got Shannon, who's going to talk to us about Otley and what Otley are doing for Otley 2030, putting it in the town context. And then we've got Marvina Newton, who's going to come back in the event and talk to us about young people. We're managing 2 meetings for Marvina this afternoon, poor thing. So she's literally on another call. She's been told till 20 past. So at 20 past, she's going to run in here and sprint in, right? Really, really fast, hot from another call, and come and join us. So let's, without any further ado, hand over to Shannon Coles. Shannon, I think you're going to be introducing your stuff. You'll be self-explanatory. You're going to talk to us about what you're doing in Otley and the town context. So, Shannon Coles.
Right, yes, so I'm Shannon. Is that sounding all right? Yeah. So I'm a volunteer activist for Otley 2030, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And yeah, we're downscaling the donut to a town level is what we're all about. Okay, so that's our mission statement. We're kind of relentlessly community-based. We stand or fall, depending on how many people we can take with us, how many parts of the community we can take with us in Otley. We've been going for around 3 years. We're a climate action hub now. We've been going for about 3 years. We're a climate action hub, and we're doing all sorts of stuff. We've got a lot of projects, a lot of working groups, like that. Hold it straight at me. This feels really threatening. Right, and I have no idea who that person you just mentioned is. So, okay, does that sound better? Can you all hear? Right, we've been going for about 3 years. We've got a lot of projects, a lot of working groups, and we are, supported by Climate Action Leeds and supported variably by Otley Town Council. Okay. So that's, this is Otley. Older than the average population, mainly because we've got very little affordable housing. It's assumed that we're quite a kind of affluent town, sort of kind of halfway between sort of North Leeds and Ilkley, but we do have some areas of very significant deprivation. And we have a food bank, which is taking, like food banks everywhere, more and more referrals all the time. A lot of independent businesses, poor public transport links. We have those bird watching sites. We've got to kind of spot the X84 site. We all kind of celebrate when we see one in the appropriate time in the appropriate place, or any of them really. And it's a funny town. On the north side of the river, which is where almost 50% of the population live, there's virtually no infrastructure, in cultural infrastructure. The shops are little kind of spa shops, and transport links are even worse there than they are on the south side. Okay, so why the donut? And the kind of simple thing is that Andrew, who's sitting over here and who is our coordinator, started getting a bit excited. He didn't show his excitement that much, but he did start getting a bit excited about the donut. And I'd had the book on top of my table, top of my pile of books on the kitchen table for a while. I had Kate's book, but I don't like donuts, and economics makes my head hurt. So I hadn't kind of got round to it. So it wasn't till Andrew started getting enthusiastic that I gave it some real attention. And then, of course, I got completely entranced by the beauty and the kind of simplicity of this, of the concept, and the all of the stuff that, all of the itches that weren't being scratched appropriately by being a climate activist, all of the kind of social justice stuff and international solidarity stuff that's been so much part of my life, came together, and it was a wonderful moment. And a bit like Paul, ever since then I've been kind of thinking donut, and I think I probably extend the concept a little bit too far. I went to the ladies here, and there's 3 ways of drying your hands. There's some unbleached paper towels, and there's some bleached paper towels, and there's a hand dryer thing. Which is the most donut? How am I supposed to dry my hands? Yeah. So I find I'm putting my own decisions through the donuts, and working very hard to try to get other people in Otley to do the same. So when we talked about the donut in Otley, we never seem to get very long. They give us, people say, well, can you come and give us 10 minutes? And sometimes we're finding that we need to talk about the life belt imagery in order to kind of get us stuck into the donut, because people talk, donut, what's that mean? That's silly, donuts are silly. So we use that life belt imagery as we go along. Okay, and that wonderful synthesis, that holism, that's the interconnectedness that everybody's talks about today, which is so meaningful in terms of the donut concept, is where we're trying to get to in terms of our donut work. Okay, so how we're doing, we've all seen this today. Paul showed this. We're doing, it's pants, isn't it? We're doing really badly. And our country, that's the UK. The bottom one is Malawi. The stark difference between the countries, both failing in different ways. So what we're going to try to do, or what we are trying to do, so we're using it as a kind of moral compass, so that the decisions that we make in Otley 2030 are all put through the donut. So we've been talking a little bit about the whole insulation problem, and the king span and the oil-based insulation, and the issues that we're having with kind of other bits with kind of sheets wool and rock wool and stuff like that. Somebody came up with cornstarch. Apparently, if you use cornstarch and kind of pop it like popcorn, it's a really good insulator. So we put that through the donuts, and corn is a major food crop for large parts of the world, and corn is also used, as we know, to feed cattle. So clearly, using a foodstuff as an insulation looks like does not look like a good idea. When you put decisions like that through the donut, you can see that they are very much first world decisions, which are going to have major impact on the kind of global majority countries. Car share apps. Are we really happy about outsourcing our need for community, our desire to build stronger communities even further by getting somebody, getting a business in to do this? Can't we just share our cars with our neighbours in order to reduce cars on the street, or with our families, or with people we work with? There's a lot of stuff that a lot of these kind of ethical problems become so much easier to deal with, I think, when we use that donut framework. We want to measure our own progress towards achieving our aims, and we're going to be using the donut to do that, particularly with the working groups. You know, how we're doing, but how we're doing in connection with each other, putting things through the donut. And yeah, we want to be a thriving town that supports a thriving planet. We're all here because we have the same ambitions for our own cities, towns, communities, countries. So we're going to be using the donut as a kind of overarching model for the progress that we make. I'm going to have to speed up a bit here, aren't I? I'm not holding it up high enough. Try to do that. Okay, so because we only get, people don't give us long enough to talk properly, we've kind of made a simple sort of donutty thing here to make it clear to groups what it is that we're banging on about. So where next? The four lenses. We've got Nathan, who's sitting over there, who's coming along to look at the local social lens for us, which is just brilliant. It's going to be a wonderful piece of work. We're very excited about that. Teaching the donut, we've started doing that already. A little bit, I'm going to talk about that. Engaging the donut, engaging business in the donut, we've done a bit of that. Creating a steering group and our donut projects. Okay, so doing the Otley selfie, but we want to do that at the same time as we do practical projects. You know, Paul was talking about, doing that walk and the talk at the same time. We don't want it to be something that's just initially an academic exercise. It's got to be more than that. So we've got Nathan. We've got a local ecology partnership that they're working on on mapping local biodiversity. We've nicked Joel's work and done a little bit of work on trying to extrapolate that down to donut level. There's obviously a lot more to be done on that. And we haven't got a clue about the fourth lens yet, but we'll hopefully address that at some point. Teaching, we've been to talk to a lot of organisations in Otley. It's not always straightforward. It can get a bit crunchy. So I did a donut thing for the Chamber of Trade, and the next thing on their agenda was getting free car parking in Otley, so they get more people into Otley, more cars into Otley to buy stuff. So there are contradictions and complexities. Okay, extending and deepening our own understanding. So we've got a couple of leaflets done so far. They're still in draft form. The ones that I've got, which people can take if they want, over by the display there, still have, the inside page is still upside down, but Alex here is working on doing something about that. So they actually look like proper leaflets. So an analysis of the transition from fossil fuels, and another one around some work that the man called Jeremy Lent has been doing, and how that applies to the donut. Engaging the businesses, got a little bit of success here. I'm going to go through all three of it because I'm nearly finished. And a steering group. Okay, think that's about it. Oh, veg box. Yeah, the first projects. Okay, so we've got a veg box. Here's Marvina. We've got a veg box delivery scheme. Our next delivery is on the 31st of May. That's free veg box in school holidays. And I think we're going to be up to about 8 or 9 carbon zero deliveries out of 19. So we've got a way to go. If anybody's got an air balloon, it would be really handy if you could get it over to Otley on the 31st of May. And the final project, creating a community larder. We're just at the beginning of that stage now. Food waste is producing 8% of all greenhouse gas emissions, and we've got people in food poverty at Otley, so it's a situation that we've got to do something about. Okay, thanks ever so much.
Brilliant, thank you, Shannon. Thank you, that's great. Great. What we'll do is we'll hand straight over to Marvina without a break, and then hopefully there might be 1 or 2 questions for you both before we move into the workshops. So that was looking at the town context. Next, we're going to look at the youth context. So Marvina Newton, I'm sure lots of you know, co-founder of Black Lives Matter Leeds and Angel House Centre for Youth. So over to you, Marvina. You're going to talk to us about youth allyship.
Yes. Hi, everyone. How are you feeling? Oh, I need energy. So let me explain. I literally just got discharged last week and I really wanted to be here. So how are we feeling? Okay. So when I say decolonize, you say decolonize. We're going to do a call and response because I want you to be like a little bit hype. Decolonize. Decolonize. System change, not climate change. Decolonize. At least you've been to a protest now, so now you can feel part of it. Welcome to becoming an activist, a climate activist. This is the energy I need. So this is your fault. I'm not using my slides. We're just doing it now. At first when I saw the donut model, I was like, must be nice, isn't it? It must be nice if we could do this. Then I read more about it. I was like, yeah, we've been talking about it, but no one was listening to us saying it the way we were saying it. And then one thing, Kate, I actually need to give credit to her when she speaks about it, is grounded in intersectionality. Not gonna lie, the environmental space is quite, white. Just look around. And I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm not ashamed to say that because for you to create change, you have to call it what it is. Why is environmentalism so centered in whiteness? Why is the global south paying for climate catastrophe that we didn't create? Why do people care more about polar bears than actually bodies of the people who are in Africa who are really struggling? Why do we cry more about the trees in the Amazon, but do not talk about the indigenous people in the Amazon? Why is it when we talk in spaces, we choose to use the biggest words and beautiful data and not try and figure out what the language of the people are? So let's make this fun. I'm really, really like the most weirdest person ever. And I like it. In my house, me and my children, we aspire to be weird because it's great. We don't conform. Recently, I started doing something around decolonizing my own mindset. I'm Nigerian. I choose not to wear as much Western clothes as I could. This fabric that I'm wearing actually used to be the wrapper that my mom used to carry my little sister on. I upcycle a lot of things. I can't keep with the Joneses, and I don't want to. But one thing I would say, walking into a space, fighting for equality when it comes to climate justice, trying to speak and breathe in a space that you know does not even care if your children could breathe. And that sounds dramatic, right? When I say decolonize the economy, I want you to reflect on the fact of who's making profits of our lives. How do I spend my money on a daily basis? The jewelry I'm wearing is actually from Tanzania. It's from a project called All Things African. So I actually buy in a purposeless way when I spend my money. And when I'm done with something, I find a way to give it to someone else. So the green pound goes around, but also I also think about the black pound. And then let me make that clear. For us to be allies, and I mean radical solidarity when it comes to this work, you cannot pick what part of climate you talk about. Let me say that so it sits back into your system. You no longer can pick what part of climate you talk about. So let's make this clear. The emergency that we are talking about is already happening in Nigeria. The emergency you're talking about is already happening in India. The emergency that you are scared of, you know, when people cry about this, I can't imagine the future, the climate anxiety for minority community. We even don't have the time to have the mental breakdown, to see that our lands are not producing fruits, to know that it's not about the sad story. This is not to guilt anyone, because what I do not want when I finish this is for you to feel this woman, this auntie just came and started saying, we're not doing our best. I'm not doing my best. I'm checking my privilege right now. And there's no shame to do that. I can acknowledge what I don't know. And I will say this, I don't know as much as I need to know. So when I say decolonizing the economy, that means I want to invite you to this journey with BLM Leeds, Angel House, Climate Action Leeds, to explore what that looks like. I don't know this information. I don't want to do the project by myself. We got funded by the big lottery to do some social media campaigns to support children and young people. And I'm now going to go into young people. Take a moment and look around you. Just take a moment. Okay. And I will say something to you. Yes, we've just got the country, we've been working with Youth Climate Action Leeds to do work around young people. And yes, we can invite young people to come to this space. So it looks good for you, everybody to see young people in this space. We invite some schools, we could do that. But I wouldn't. Because we need to be in this part in intersectional environmentalism where we do not youth wash, where when we bring them into spaces, we work. And this is what I would give Kaur the opportunity. Being an ally is not easy. You're gonna get it wrong. And decolonizing your economy, you're gonna also not see things as quick. But you have to be patient with the community in the process of how you build this. You have to see how you put that voice and influence. We are, at the moment, have worked on a statement issued that we think anyone in Leeds who is working with children and young people, before you get access, you sign this statement to make sure that their voice and influence matters, that you do not interpret what they say. And you also allow them to lead. Youth Strike in Leeds have led in a lot of amazing things when it comes to raising awareness. I have to give credit to my colleague, Shannon, who has done some amazing work around the youth statement, building allyship. And I'm gonna come into the allyship process before I go into some of the practical things that we need to do next. Sorry, I'm always watching the time, so I'm trying to speak really fast. How's everybody doing? Anyone triggered? Oh, should I said trigger warning? No, okay. Climate change don't give you no trigger warning. That's the reality. But let's give you hope. You could choose to become an activated human being today. Simple. You can come and this could be a beautiful event. You've come to the event, it's great. I've learned some great things. Oh my gosh, pictures, tweets, Instagram, no. Or you can choose to be an activated human being and have a little bit of empathy. Step into my shoe. It's a fabulous shoe to be in. Come on. You know, and my toes done too. Step into my shoe. The intersectionality of why I look at the environment is a little bit different. Coming from the Niger Delta area, coming from a country that should be one of the richest in the world, we have to decolonize the story of the fact that it's also one of the poorest based on, when I say poorest, I mean around climate, because we've got amazing, rich and amazing cultural heritage, but colonization leaves a dirty stain. And I know nobody wants to talk about it. I'm gonna say this now with politeness, no apology. My biggest fear is nice white people when it comes to climate change. And let me explain that really simple. I am not racist, not nice white people. I went to Africa and I built an orphanage, nice white people. My brother's sister's dog is Black, nice white people. I've never said anything, but I've stood there and watched people actually degrade and not put data that actually says the fact of how colonization, capitalism is ruining the global South. Those kind of nice white people. The ones that will go into our community and ask us to give us data and fit into their insight report, but never think about paying us. Decolonize your economy. The fact that I would have to prove my words when I know I can walk into a space, but I would also then get racially gaslighted when I talk about lived experience. I don't need your data because you still not got my information correct yet. Research has still not been done around decolonizing the economy. So when I say allyship, it's simple. A, acknowledge that there's a problem. Acknowledge the truth. Racism is real. David Oluwale. If you don't know who David Oluwale is, let me just bring that into your perspective, because every time I look at this donut, I try and think, I'm also part of the Nigerian community. I try and imagine, how do I talk to David about the donut right now? A homeless man who was living in Leeds, came from Nigeria here. Police decided to bully him, and they decided to kill him and drop his body in just down there. And imagine that happened. It was horrible. Yes, that was our George Floyd. So I know you guys say that is America. Now that was our George Floyd, but this was the first racial justice case we won. And then we managed to get him a plaque. After 13 years of the community, I mean, united, we all stood. Within 3 hours of that plaque going up this week, it got stolen. So let me just explain what racial trauma looks like for my daughter, who was so excited to see justice and then had to watch in a PSHE class, mommy say how sad she is that the story has been erased. And she goes, so mommy, can they erase us from history? Decolonize your economy. Because you can't have any conversation about economy if you do not look at the harm that the country, the bigger cities, the global north, you can't have the conversation. If you don't work in an intersectional environmentalist way, you're part of the problem. Simple. It is that direct and it's that strong. And if David is in that box, I know we're going to go into workshop about housing, we're going to go into food, we're going to go into stuff like that. How many food banks have fufu in the food bank? How many food banks have okra in the food bank? How many food banks can I actually get like my Nigerian beans? But I can get baked beans. You should think about climate justice and decolonizing your economy. What's happened in Ukraine is horrible. I agree. But what happens in Ukraine has shown me something that even in the hardest time, people have the time to be racist. They actually have the time to be racist. It's a lot of work. To have hate is a lot of work. So when they have that, that also affects the economy. So imagine refugees and asylum seekers coming into Leeds and knowing that there's a grade of who is a refugee now. And certain people are refugees and the government will give £300 a month for you to house them in your house. I never saw that for anyone coming from, like Syria. Did you see anything like that? You can correct me. Did that happen for Afghanistan? I remember everybody was really sad the Taliban, took charge. I didn't see no money moving, but for some reason, less than 4 weeks, money came up. Decolonize your economy. Climate justice is that. It's simple. Climate justice is what we all should talk about. Climate justice, when you're creating the programs of the engagement in the community, you look and say, does this meeting reflect the people who I'm about to build this for? Is everybody involved? If someone is dyslexic, find a creative tool for them to be involved. And next time we'll make sure there's a BLSL interpreter next time, because I'm gonna make sure. This is me being an ally. We'll find different ways of any way we're failing in any equality and diversity way of inclusion to bring those things into place. 2 minutes or 1 minute? Okay, cool. Yeah, great. And all those things are really brilliant for us to think about. It's toxic in the activism space. It's toxic actually in the environmental space, because you spend your time knowing that you don't know what you don't know. I'm trying to just get the information to see how I could teach everybody. It doesn't matter whether it's just Black people, it doesn't matter whether it's Asian people, but it's like, don't look up, even though that film is a different kind of thing. We'll talk about that later. I want you to think about, imagine you know a media is about to hit Leeds right now. Why wouldn't you tell other people? So when you choose not to find ways to include minorities' voices, young people's voices, disabled people's voices, you're choosing to leave them without giving them the option to ever change their choices. See, this does not need to be depressive. I know climate anxiety is real, but there's hope if we all start looking at who is missing in the conversation. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to be a scholar. As you said, sis, sorry, always ask people their pronoun, don't assume. I apologize for that. Thanks. What's your pronoun, by the way? She, all right, brilliant. And when you make a mistake, say sorry and just crack on. Allyship rule number 1. So acknowledge the problem, A, act on it, advocate. When you see it's wrong, do something. L, listen, actively listen. Don't listen to respond. Don't listen to think about what funding you can use with that partnership with the person. Don't, literally, is the real, it's true. Don't listen to be able to say, did it really happen like that? I've never experienced that. No one cares what you experienced. I'm saying it. No one cares. It's not about you. And yes, I know sometimes we'll cry, but remember, some people don't have the luxury of crying about the trauma they've gone through. The other L is for you to learn and unlearn your own unconscious bias when it comes to decolonizing the economy and being an ally. We all have unconscious bias. Deal with it. I do. I like Chelsea. Yes, you guys ain't Leeds. Well, we'll get on with it. But I know I went there. But the only way is Leeds. We lead in everything we do. The people of Leeds makes me stay in this space. And the last bit for me is why. And this is where we fail in environmentalism, in climate, in this conversation. So for this to work, you have to yield your privilege and turn it into power. It's easy. And I'm going to just do something really quickly. Can I just get 2 volunteers? Really, actually 3 people, quick, if you're brave and you can do it. Oh, great, great. I like this. Oh, brilliant. This is, can you stand over there? Stand in the light. I'm just going to do this really quick because sometimes it's hard to explain this. I'm just going to ask 4 random questions, take a step forward. You know about the privilege walk. And take a step backwards if you don't, if something. But I'm going to do it around the donuts economics. If you grew up and had access to green spaces, take a step forward. If you ever had to experience growing your own crops with your family, take a step forward. Like, it's yes or no. Don't worry, you don't need to explain. Did you get to grow anything? Did you plant? If you'd ever put your hand in the soil and planted something, take a step forward. If you ever had to worry about where your next meal came from, take a step backward. If you have to change if there's a negative representation of your community or your gender or your race, take a step backwards. On the media, take a step backwards. If you can walk around Leeds without fear of being assaulted, take a step forward. If you've ever inherited any money, take a step forward. If you can show love to your romantic partner without fear of being attacked, take a step forward. This is your final position. I'm going to stop there because of time. You would normally go deeper into this and it will be all that jazz. But I want you to look, and I'm going to do this quick. How does it feel being here? Are you surprised? Did you know?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I knew where that was going, yeah.
I could also see like there was a little bit of, oh, I don't really want to be in the front.
Maybe, yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Okay. I saw your face each time you felt like you couldn't move. Like how does it feel to be here? Like you're quite good, babes. You're like...
Cool, but I was a bit like I just knew that I was where I'm probably going to end up on most of them, and then there was a few where I was like, oh, I'm going to get to go forward now.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I did cheat because it gets like.
Yeah. It was, but it's good, man. It's like fine, isn't it? It just shows a few things without like demonizing anyone. It's not individualizing the problem. It's just is what it is, right? There's certain things that happen as a result of life. Yeah.
The society. How does it feel being where you are?
Yeah, it feels okay, but it's just interesting, isn't it? Whenever you're kind of asked to reveal things like your privilege, like I try to do this as much as I can, but like it's still uncomfortable. I'm still uncomfortable, even though I want to own my position of privilege as it is. Do you know what I mean? So it's interesting.
So, what's your name, Andrew? Andrew, you can pick one person of your choice and bring them forward. So, I know, right? You can pick. Remember, I just did a whole workshop on allyship. I said yield your power. Pick anybody of your choice. One person. You can't pick two. Oh, no, Rowan, sorry, you can't move because they're here. There's so many barriers. There's a whole, like, ecological ceiling there. So go get Rowan. She can't move. There's all that, like bruh, can't you see, like, there's all this? She's there. So you have to go get her and bring her to your position. Well, you've left her halfway again. Like, she has to come. Yeah? All right, and you have to guide. The reason I just wanted you to see that's like, it's all right. No, like, it happens, right? I want you to see that this is just not a donut. This is life.
And in the village where I spread the ashes, it's 44 degrees, and people are like they've had the biggest heat rise since April that they have in decades. It's not like a thing that's that far away as well. It's just like literally I got back and they were like, we've gone through the biggest heat wave, the heat increase. So I think it's important to, when we talk about these things, I think it's important not to think that what we mean is some like ancestors from hundreds of years ago. I mean, like, my grandparents and my parents are here because of partition, and half of their families back there because they couldn't, and we're stuck between worlds. So I think, and I'm like got privilege, right? I'm just saying that I don't think what you've just talked about, don't try and imagine it as like some history pictures that are black and white. Literally just think like one generation, or as you can see with all the displacement and war that's happening now, it's happening live, as well as the histories of people like us as well.
So do you know what's beautiful? I thought, you thought you were left behind. You get to pick someone to come forward. This is what we can do united. We're part of one race, the human race. It's simple. Race is a social construct. So when we talk about how do we make this a reality, just one action at a time. Don't make it complicated. It could just be you. But what I want you to acknowledge is that one person's action could create a ripple effect. It could be small. It could be the fact you choose to recycle. It could be the fact you choose to help me with decolonizing the economy. It could be the fact that you sign up your organization to the youth statement from Angel House. But what you're not allowed to do is not do anything, because silence is consent and silence is violence. Thank you so much. Give a round of applause to my volunteers. And before I pass it, I need that energy, hopefully, so I know you don't hate me, or I don't really mind if you don't like me. Decolonize. System change, not climate change. Decolonize. I want you to get comfortable using the word decolonize. Decolonize your mind, decolonize your speech, decolonize your language, decolonize everything about you. And that's how we get this donut working for all of us. Want you to be my ally? Would you be my allies? Would you be youth allies? Okay, we'll work on that one because that came late. But I love you. Take care.
Oh, that was just a massive round of thank you, Marvina. That was just fabulous. Thank you so much. That was really great. And also thank you to Shannon as well for your fabulous presentation about what's going on in Otley. Whoa, that was great. Right, we're going to have a quick break now. There's tea and coffee, I think, at the back. Is that right? Am I seeing that there's tea and coffee up there now? And donuts? Yep, donuts are there. Okay, vegan donuts. So what I'm going to ask you to do, just because of time, if that's okay, and because you're all a little tardy at getting back, right? I'm afraid to say it's taking quite a lot of organisation and herding to get everybody back down here. Can you all go up and get your teas, coffees and donuts and then try and come back as quickly as possible, not stay gassing at the back if that's all right. We're going to start again in 10 minutes time. We'll see you then. Right, we are in the last session now of this event. I've been told I have to get this thing finished by 5 o'clock because we have all got to get out of here really, really, really quickly. Now, the advantage of having someone who spends most of their life on live radio and live TV is that timing is all in that. So when you told you've got 2 minutes, it doesn't matter if someone's in the middle of something, you've got 2 minutes. So we will be finished by 5 o'clock. Okay, panel, is that all right? I am going to start shutting you all up. If that's all right. Let's make sure you've got a microphone there. There's a microphone, it'll need turning on. Yep, okay, so what's gonna happen here is we're gonna have a bit of a panel. We're gonna have some engagement and feedback. There's also though some footprints. Footprints there. If we could start passing those around, what we would like you to do on those footprints is to think about what you can bring to this work and to this activity. Paul's going to explain a bit more in a minute. Paul's going to kind of give us that explanation and talk about next steps. And then I'm going to engage the panel and yourselves. I'm going to be asking you, what are you going to write on your footprint? Okay. What do you think you personally can bring? So Paul, can I hand over to you then to talk about, if you like, the offer and the ask and what next?
Super great. And then just to clarify on the lovely footprints that are going around, given that we've got to be out of here for 5, feel free to write something on them and put them on with these little sticky notes, which are going around as well before 5, so we don't get a big block near the board. Now, the footprint's lovely because it's part of the journey, right? So what goes on the footprint is, if you've got a kind of, and I was chatting to this with Rob, who kind of phrased it in a lovely way, Rob, and it's like, if there's a kind of energy that you have that you're bringing to this process or a desire about where you want to see it go, could you put that on it and then put it along our journey line? Where are you putting it, Kat? That's interesting. Below. Yeah, don't ruin our lovely illustration. Yeah, just pass them to Kat and Anisha. You'll put them on, yeah? Yeah, and Jenny, yeah? Just below it, yeah. So you hopefully, because it's the end of the day, like you've experienced quite a lot and you've brought a whole bunch of skills and resources and ideas with you. So like, what energy have you brought to this process? What are your kind of skills and interests going forward? What could you offer? What could you offer? Yeah, because I think here's our offer and our ask. Our ask to you is to acknowledge, to recognize that we're a fairly small, moderately resourced group. We're quite new and emerging. and we're just starting this process. We got ourselves here today by good luck, fortune, and hard work. So we got to this point without, and to be honest, we're going to be very humble about this, without having an absolutely watertight plan about what happens next. And that was partly intentional because this is an emergent process. So we've got to this point today. Climate Action Leeds is about a year or so in. We've got 3 or 4 years left. So the ask to you is just to recognise where we're at. Many of us are working on a small amount of time. There's Jenny, myself, there's Anzia, there's Andy, there's Simon as part of our Future Leeds team. David's volunteering with us, and Matt from our Future Leeds. And then there's others from the Climate Action Leeds programme. There's people who've been here today. There's Maya. I'm not sure if she's gone yet, but and then there's some of the transition partners, Hannah and Rowan and others. And sorry, there's loads, and Andrew and loads of people. Sorry, actually half the audience is brilliant. So we're not that small, are we? But there's not a huge amount of hours across that whole team. So we do need people to kind of, from where you're standing and the resources you have, the workplaces and that kind of stuff, and the networks, we need to harness that, yeah, to combine your working hours together. Yeah, so that's the ask. So the offer is, we aren't just going to disappear. The offer is we want to, principally, we want to see where this donut goes in terms specifically of some of the Climate Action Leeds stuff we're developing. So certainly with the transition partners, you know, how can it support their work in their sector planning and their sector roundtables that they're doing over the next 6 months and then onwards for years to come. With the council, how can support the council, and specifically with Sue and Tony Herman, you know, with the community hub planning process. There's some wonderful links we've made with IMI and what they're doing in Birmingham in terms of neighbourhood donut work, which we want to do some kind of joint work with in terms of like, how can we like bring this donut process to neighbourhood level? There's some wonderful work. We're only just starting with Marvina in terms of what does this mean in terms of youth allyship and decolonising economics and really understanding how we engage and empower young people. So we're only just starting on that work with Marvina. So there's lots we're doing. And if anyone knows anyone with a massive bag of cash who can fund us even more, like totally get in touch with us, yeah? So there's various offers there, yeah? We will, Anzia and Jenny specifically, will over the next couple of months, really will be focused on not making the process, but convening a process with those people who are interested in taking it forward, yeah? So that's where we want to get to. We want to like shape that process of where this goes next together. And that might mean a big meeting May or June where those who are interested get back together with us and we take it forward in that planning process, yeah? But there will be quite a detailed next steps through an email via the Eventbrite list where we send you various resources and ideas, and that's where you can get in touch with us. In the green report itself, remember, there's our emails, so you can email us. There's a whole bunch of emails there. There's the Climate Action Leeds website, which is full of contacts. Yeah, so if you don't feel you don't know how to contact us, please let us know before, or we'll certainly be in the wardrobe for a drink afterwards. Yeah. So there's various offers and asks. I might have missed something, but I think we'll pick things up in the Q&A where other people in the audience might want to say additional things.
Great, thank you, Paul. Thank you so much. So before we kind of come to bring in our panel, who would like to shout out what they're going to write on their footprints? What are you bringing? Oh, that is great. That's really great. For those of you who don't know Compassionate Leeds and Leeds Kindness Festival, last year you held KindX, the first of its kind in the world, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. And that real push to make Leeds a kind city. And I think that is great to have a conversation about kindness and the economy. Is really fab. That's a great offer. Thank you. If you've written it on your footprint, so we won't lose it. Who else is going to tell us what they're going to write on their footprint? Fabulous, thank you. While you were talking, just reminds me, I went to see the Book of Mormon last week. Well, me and Ali went to see the book, and there's a lot about frogs in that. Anyway, just made me think. You are, yeah. Oh, okay, she says we shouldn't go there. Okay, who else is going to write something on their footprint? Who else wants to share that? No, another one yet? Businesses in, sorry. Yep. Yeah. Cool. No, really good. Please do write that down there, because that obviously came up earlier on as well. Who else would like to add something else? Tell us what they're going to write on their footprint. Anyone else? No? Okay. What? Oh, one more. Yeah. Are you offering to cycle anything anywhere then? Are you offering to cycle anything? Great, perfect. Thank you very much. There we go. Cool, brilliant. No. Great, thank you very much for that. Anyone here? Yeah, please. Yeah, fabulous. Do you know what? Thank you. And actually, I think that is a really brilliant one for us to finish this section on, because that's what it's all about, isn't it, today? Absolutely brilliant. And if everybody here says they're going to do that, take it back to their own local communities, that is just fabulous. Thank you very much for that. And on that basis, I'm just going to come to our panel. I think that next thing is your suggestions. Very quickly, let's go down. What are your suggestions for what next?
So my suggestions would be that before you label yourselves as sectors and as all the different things that you go back into your jobs or your practices, remember that you're all, in theory, hopefully, somebody's neighbour. You live on someone's street. 2 circles can tell quite a simple, compelling story. Like, really try and take off all of these big, heavy labels first, or as part of what you're doing, because it's so powerful to start from your household, your neighbours, the little patch, some chalk, and a little patch of road in front of you. So I would recommend that one of the things that can sometimes happen in events like this is you can have this surge of inspiration and then be like, oh, because there's so much to do. And of course, that will be true because you can connect and you can do so much and we can all do so much together. But if you can try to persistently have really creative proximity to just your immediate surroundings and just be that like beacon of that story, it will begin to be a regenerative cycle in yourself, because everywhere you go, you'll find different ways to have this conversation, to talk about it. But go and see what your front patio lawn, patch of pavement, anything can do. Poster in a window can do to just start a conversation about this, literally 2 circles that tell us a really important story about the future.
Great, thank you. Marvina, what are your suggestions for where we go next?
So I can commit to what I know I would do, which would be to bring fun to this, bring hope to it, and take it back to my community. But not take it back to my community with empty hands, strategically be able to look at how do I compensate for any barriers that will stop my community engaging with it, acknowledging what the fears of my community will look like. But most people who know me know I love this process of engaging with people, identifying what they love. I just want to work with people on what they love to fix what they hate in society. And that's how we can create a change around the donut economics. But then I also want to let people know that it's legitimate if you feel powerless sometimes. And then we're here to work together, regardless of your race, sexuality, or religion. I think it's just people coming together as a city, proud of making sure our children, I'm doing this for my kids, I'm selfish. I would like them to breed. I would like them to see, I want their kids to see the future too, and have food and have houses. It's that simple. So everybody has a right to have a conversation. And I'm going to be working closely with Leeds Dec around the youth and climate curriculum to make sure that we look at ways to decolonize the economy. I think BLM Leeds has committed 3,000 to build some content, some information that's going to go online. Yes, so if we are building 3,000 and we're getting, you guys drop some money too in it. Anytime you feel like, because third sector organization and marginalized communities, we do this in our sleeps. We don't ask people for help. But like if you've got resources, and I don't mean money, your time is currency to me.
Yeah, we can do something with it. Thank you so much, Marvin. Thank you. Leonora, what are you saying? Where does this go next?
I would say, one of the things I would say is recognize that we're all part of a same movement, and that we're supporting and we're energizing each other. And it can be very lonely and very hard, as you were just saying. People are facing obstacles every day, whether you're working in a local council, whether you're working in a business that wants to change their model, whether you're working with a communities, you're facing obstacles every day. And it may feel like it's hopeless, and it may feel like this work is very hard, and it is, but also we're really not alone. It's a huge community out there. It's a huge community of people that are rallying around donut economics, and it's an even huger community of people working to change the systems, to bring new paradigms, fighting for social justice, fighting for climate justice, and being part. I believe, I hope that everybody's as energized as I am from spending the day to day.
Well, we love to send people away from Leeds energized, don't we? Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Prof, if we can come to you, what's your recommendation for what next?
Some people ask, what's the action in Doughnut Economics Action Lab about? Because we see a lot of talking, we don't see necessarily a lot of kind of stuff happening. And I guess what I want to bring to this is the sense that action can be many things. And Climate Action Leeds, and action is in the title of this organization too. And when we were in Amsterdam, really fortunate enough in September, doing a workshop across the city stakeholders from business and local officials and community and education, one of the themes that came out was, don't wait, act now. And that's great. So you have energy for something, you have a gift for something. You could, even if that's a conversation with your neighbor, you can act now. You can really take that first step and do that straight away. But what we're doing now is a level of action where we're talking and working through things that we can't do by ourselves. We can't do things individually. We have to come together. There are things that are stopping people from acting now. Marvina and I were just saying, you know, like, I want to act, but actually there are so many things blocking me. So how can we work together through those blockages? What we did today was practice how we can think holistically, interconnectedly, to work through some really complex challenges. So we need to come together through these meetings, through the networks and communities. But there's also a deeper level of action, which is where we sit with the complexities that we can't solve. We can't see a pathway forward. How do we decolonize the economy? No one yet knows. So how do we sit with that, the predicaments of the 21st century, and make space for that and find time to slow down together? So I invite you to act now. I invite you to connect with others, and I invite you to sit with the complexity of this work. So those are three types of action I would leave you with.
Thank you very much. Whoa. So we've got a variety of different ideas there. You're all going to write your footprints. I know you're all going to stick them over there. I want to come back to what you said there, go back to our own community, our neighbourhood, and take this forward. We are coming up towards the end. So before I kind of just say the final words, I want to do some thank yous, if that's all right. I have to say, I think this has been a phenomenally organised event. I go to a lot of these events, and I think the team here have done a phenomenal job on this event. Really, honestly, everyone involved in the organising should be so chuffed. So give us a wave, right? So Simon, hey, come on, Keith O'Connor, Is Connor here still? Connor, who looked after us at the back, looked after our Zoom so well. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah Russell, Sarah, she's at the back there. Victoria, where's Victoria? Oh, there you are, thank you. Debbie. She's gone. Okay, Debbie's gone. Matt, where's Matt? Oh, up the back. Thank you, Matt. Andrew. Let's, yeah. David's over here. Brilliant. Ansi, you're there. Well done for everything. Kat, where's Kat gone? She's up there. Great. And Jenny as well. Thank you. Ray. And then I'm going to run through these names in one list. Oh, excuse me. And then you can cheer them all at once. Our brilliant speakers and facilitators. Neil, Rob, Leonora, Imi, Paul, Anisha, Kat, Shannon, Marvina, Stella, Jenny. Give them a massive round of applause. Because it's been so well organised today, I have to say. Paul, before I do a little bit of summing up, did you want to say one last thing? No? Okay. So normally at this point, okay, I try and pull together the themes and things like that. So I'm going to do that today. I am going to do that. I always do that at the end of events. You know, what do I think's come through? And there's obviously been so many things, but I'm going to bring it back to a bit of Leeds. If I'm going to go right Leeds, if that's all right. Okay, we will forget the Chelsea mention. No, it was Marvina mentioned Chelsea. For those of you who don't know, if you're not into football, obviously it could have been worse. It could have been Man United that she mentioned. But to be honest, Chelsea is Leeds' second most hated team. So they, you know, so you're a brave. You what? They robbed us, yeah. Some people don't forget. So you're a brave woman talking about Chelsea in Leeds. But let's bring it back to Leeds. Let's just get dead Leeds for a minute. One of the things that I'm really taken by is about the whole thing about our history and what happened in the past and where we go forward and making this very Leeds. And bear with me because this is a bit personal, but at the start of lockdown, Rob's still here over here. Rob very, very kindly was part of a project where I got commissioned to make a podcast about some aspects of Leeds and sustainability. And it's on the Zero Waste Leeds website. And I made a podcast which went back to a documentary that my father made in 1973 about the city of Leeds. And I would recommend, if you want to know some stuff about Leeds and its history and planning and why Leeds is the city that it is, go back and watch this. It's called In Search of the City, and it's on my channel on YouTube. Anyway, that was actually mainly about planning and housing and transport. But of course, in it, he talked about the clothing industry because this city was based on the clothing industry. So I did loads of research on this. And in fact, just 2 days ago, I wrote an article for a blog about Leeds' history around the clothing trade. And I was rewatching bits of A House Through Time. I don't know if some of you watched that on BBC. And I was kind of pulling all that together. And as part of doing that podcast, I pulled together a group of people to talk about what is Leedsness. And actually, everyone I spoke to for that podcast, I asked them that question, what is Leedsness? Right. And it was really interesting because virtually everybody struggled. But in the end, we all kind of came to the same place. And what I found so interesting was that David Olusoga also came to a very similar place in The House Through Time, which pleased me, about a city of innovation and a city that is kind of quite practical, a very twin track city, which has amazing, brilliant stuff side by they're not very good. And it's both things at the same time, actually. But also a city of innovation where we practically just get on with stuff and we innovate. Anyway, the reason I mention all this is because we were talking about the harm that's been done and where we're at the moment and the whole questions about sustainability. And the truth of the matter is that we know climate change tracks back to the start of the Industrial Revolution, right? And this is one of the places where that Industrial Revolution started. So we have to, in some ways, I think, own and take responsibility for our history, right? As the centre of the clothing trade, which we were, for the fact that we were part of making that change that's dramatically affected the entire world. We've got that history and that legacy that we're building on, but we've also got the opportunity to do something about it now. And the podcast was saying we want to change the face of, well, actually, if you watch the program, you'll see the arguments made there that actually the high street was created in Leeds. The way we shop was created in Leeds because of the clothing industry. And, you know, we did it once, we changed the face of clothing. Could we do it again, but this time to be sustainable? So I put that question back okay, we were part of creating this problem. We were a major part of creating this problem in our city. Can we be not one of the pioneers, because obviously so many cities are already doing it, but can we be right at the forefront as well on trying to find some of the solutions to dealing with some of the problems that frankly our city was part of creating. So I think within that, remember equality and justice. We keep talking about climate justice and social justice and fair, and remembering that those of us who are feeling the effects are not the same. We're not feeling it the same across the city, and we're not feeling it the same across the world. But as a city, we've got a responsibility. Anyway, that's my summing up, I think, of some of what's gone on here today. Words that were said a lot: ripple, acknowledgement, small steps, join together, be fair, neighbourhoods. We can all take action. And of course, I'm going to finish on the statement of the conference. What was it? Can you all remember? Sparkles, come on. What was the statement of the conference? It was, we have to get into the bit where the sprinkles are. So there we go. Everybody get into the sprinkles. Thank you, everyone. And just before we finish, Imi's lost her copy of the report and she's found it. Okay, it's all right. She's got some notes in it. Everybody give yourself a massive round of applause. We're going to need it to do this work. Thank you all very much.